Chapter 1456. Lily's slightly lonely expression made Ming's heart ache. He placed his warm palm on her shoulder and said softly, "No, you can be pregnant. Didn't the doctor say that there is a possibility that you're already pregnant? You have to believe the doctor. Let's go. We'll know after a checkup." Lily's heart felt a little uneasy, and she was always a little timid. But her desire for a child was very strong. After thinking about it again and again, Lily followed Ming to the obstetrics and gynecology department. After a series of examinations and inquiries, the senior female doctor pushed up her glasses and said, "You are pregnant." Lily was stunned by the few words that were spoken so casually. Ming acted as if he had won a prize. He laughed loudly and said, "Really?" Ming's reaction was too exaggerated. The doctor was already used to it. She nodded and continued to ask, "How long has it been since your period came?" "Great. That was great. You are really pregnant." Ming hugged Lily excitedly and shouted, "Lily, did you hear that? Pregnant. Pregnant." Lily still couldn't believe it and said, "Didn't they say that it is difficult for me to get pregnant? My uterus is cold. If you have a cold uterus, you need to pay more attention. It is more difficult to get pregnant, but it is not impossible. You need to be careful when you exercise. It is not easy to protect the fetus with a cold uterus." The doctor lowered her head to write and said, "When was the last time you had a period?" "More than a month ago. About 5-6 weeks. It has been so long. Didn't you notice it?" The doctor looked at her and asked, "My period is a bit messy. Sometimes it is less than a month. Sometimes it is 2 months, 3 months." The doctor frowned and said, "You can't be like this. How can you not take care of it? When did you start to feel uncomfortable?" "A few days ago. I am very tired and sleepy every day, and I can't eat, especially at our wedding a few days ago." "You just had your wedding a few days ago? Don't be too tired. I saw that you had an abortion before, and it was twins, right? A cold womb is probably the after effect of having an abortion. You didn't recuperate well during your confinement period, so your body is left with a lingering illness." The doctor asked meaningfully, "Do you have sexual intercourse frequently?" Ahem. Lily was a little embarrassed. "Apart from my period, I have it every day." When the doctor heard that, she took a deep look at Ming and said, "Young man, you're in good health. But next, you'll have to control yourself when you're pregnant. From your reaction, you're still in the early stages of pregnancy. Now is the most dangerous time. Don't do strenuous exercise. It's not good for the baby, and the pregnant woman will also feel uncomfortable." "Yes, yes, yes." Ming's eyes narrowed as he smiled. "I definitely won't. I'll prescribe you some health supplements to supplement your calcium. Go and have a checkup. You can go back when you're done." The doctor returned the medical record to Lily. Ming quickly picked up the medical records and carefully protected Lily as they walked. "Be careful, be careful." The doctor found it funny, but at the same time there was envy in his eyes. He shouted, "Zhao Hong." After Lily was done with the examination, Ming was grinning from ear to ear the whole time. Chapter 1457. Ming smiled even more foolishly. He touched his head and said, "I'm going to be a father. Our children are back." Hearing that, Lily smiled and reached out to touch her lower abdomen. She felt a little magical. She thought she would never be a mother in her life. She didn't expect it to be so soon. This child came more suddenly than she had imagined. That's great. God didn't deprive me of my right to be a mother. God is still kind. Ming saw her little movement and stopped. He gently held her in his arms and whispered, "Don't think too much. In the future, I will be the father and you'll be the mother. These 5 children will definitely be born smoothly and healthily." Lily was amused by Ming's words. She reached out and patted him. "What do you think I am? 5 children?" Ming laughed and hugged her. He kissed her on the cheek and said, "Let's go back, mother of the children." "Well, yes, father of the children." As they went back and forth, their faces were filled with smiles. As soon as Ming got in the car, he called Xiao Ziqing. It was already afternoon, and Xiao Ziqing seemed to be working out. When she received Ming's call, she was a little out of breath and said, "Hello. If you have something to say, say it quickly. I'm very busy." Ming smiled and said as he drove, Mom, I want to tell you something very happy. Do you want to guess? What is it? Just say it. I don't have time to guess. Xiao Ziqing was a little impatient. She was running and panting. Hey, why is your temper getting worse? Are you going through menopause? Get lost. If there's nothing else, I'm hanging up. Mom, you're going to be a grandmother. Ming's words were a little sudden, and Xiao Ziqing was stunned. She immediately pressed the stop button on the treadmill and asked incredulously, What did you just say? You're going to be a grandmother. I'm going to be a father. And you, Lily's going to be a mother. Our little baby is going to be born. Xiao Ziqing laughed and said so fast, You're too amazing. I thought it would be difficult for Lily to get pregnant. I was already mentally prepared with your father. But you did this to me. Ming had turned on the car phone and put it on speaker. When the couple heard this, they were both stunned. Mom, how did you know? Xiao Ziqing was in a good mood. She snorted and said, Do you think Mommy doesn't know anything? Let me tell you, I know everything. Do you think you'll be fine just by hiding it from me? I will investigate it myself. In other words, Xiao Ziqing knew about this a long time ago, but she didn't use it to cause trouble for her. That meant that he had completely accepted Yulili, right? Realizing this, Yulili suddenly felt a little happy. An indescribable emotion rushed up from the bottom of his heart. Tears welled up her eyes as she sobbed, Mom! Suddenly hearing Yulili's voice, Xiao Ziqing was silent. He stopped the car on the side of the road and comforted her. Why are you crying? Don't cry, don't cry. Be good and take good care of the child. I owe my wife, don't cry. Chapter 1458. Silly child. Xiao Ziqing's voice contained a hint of laughter. What's the use of blaming you? You're still my only daughter-in-law. Hearing this, Yulili sobbed even harder and burst into tears. Ming was at a loss. For a moment, he didn't know whether to hug her or hold her. He frantically wiped her tears and said, Don't cry, don't cry. On the other end of the line, Xiao Ziqing laughed and said, My silly son, during pregnancy, your emotions fluctuate greatly. It's normal to cry and laugh. Why are you acting like the idiot next door? When she heard Xiao Ziqing's mocking words, Yulili's sobbing stopped, and she burst out laughing. This made Ming's cheeks turn red. He said, Mom, my wife is still here. How can you say that? On the other end of the line, Xiao Ziqing laughed even more happily and said, Do you have times when you're shy? All right, I'm not talking to you anymore. I'm going to coax my wife. Ming hung up the phone and took a tissue to wipe her tears. But he found that Yulili's body was trembling slightly. He lifted her face and saw a big smile on her tear-stained face. Ming was speechless. This pregnant woman's emotions fluctuated greatly. One moment she was crying, the next moment she was laughing. But seeing her smile, Ming relaxed a lot. He smiled bitterly and said, You're going to make me crazy. Yulili laughed out loud and said, Idiot next door, ha ha. Ming was speechless. Resigned to his fate, Ming quickly drove back to the villa. As he drove, he made phone calls. Along the way, Ming informed all his good friends. The first thing he called was Li Siqing. The first thing he said was, Second brother, I'm going to be a father. Li Siqing replied, Oh, I've been a father for a long time. No, mine is different from yours, Ming said. How is it different? Oh, I'm the father of a pair of twins. You only have one child, right? No, it's my first time being a father. I just found out today. Shouldn't you congratulate me? Li Siqing was accompanying his wife for a prenatal checkup. Looking at Su Qianxi in the ultrasound room, he smiled and said, Congratulations, but I'm going to be a father for the second time. You should congratulate me too. Oh, me. I can't continue this conversation. He hung up the phone and called Luo Zhan. Luo Zhan was typing on the keyboard in the company. Lines of code jumped out, and the psychological sense of achievement was also surging. The phone rang. It was Ming. Before Luo Zhan could say hello, he heard Ming shout, Luo Zhan, I'm going to be a father. Luo Zhan's hand on the keyboard trembled, and all the code on the computer was gone. His first reaction was to shout, F***CK. He laughed out loud and said, My wife is pregnant. I'm finally going to be a father. Look at you, you're already 32 years old. Why don't you go find a partner and have fun? Luo Zhan silently restored the data and said, "Didn't you just get married yesterday? Don't you usually get pregnant after half a year? Why don't you follow the rules? This is too much." Chapter 1459. Luo Zhan was speechless. I can't continue the conversation. Hearing the sound of the phone being hung up, Oming suddenly felt a sense of satisfaction. Following that, he made a lot of calls to his other friends. Oming was extremely happy. When he got home, Lily couldn't take it anymore. She collapsed on the bed and fell asleep. Oming hugged her and slept in his clothes. His lips curled up, and he was in a good mood. She slept for the whole day. Lily's head was spinning. When she woke up, Oming was no longer by her side. "Oming." Lily called his name, but there was no response. She put on her slippers and opened the bedroom door. She heard a light noise outside. She walked downstairs and saw Oming busy in the kitchen. He was very busy. When she got closer, Lily was surprised. She burst out laughing and asked, "You're actually cooking?" When Oming heard that, he was caught off guard. His hands were scalded. He immediately pinched his ears and laughed. "I'm making soup. It's very simple. After it's done, I just need to add salt." "Did you add salt?" "Not yet. I'm afraid I'll add too much. You know better than me. Come over and add salt." Oming waved his hand. He put down a spoon in his hand and picked up the salt jar. Lily walked over slowly. After washing her hands, she added seasoning to the soup. "Do you have parsley?" "No." Oming suddenly realized and said, "No wonder I always felt that something was missing when I bought the ingredients. It was the parsley. I'll go buy it." "No need. I'll drink it all the same." Lily scooped some into a bowl and tasted it. She was a little surprised and said, "It's quite fragrant. You should try it too." "Really?" Oming suddenly felt that he was amazing. "It's my first time making soup." As he said that, he took a sip and frowned. "Are you serious?" There was only the taste of water. The ingredients hadn't even been boiled yet. It tasted terrible. Lily saw his expression and said, "It's quite delicious. It's much better than the first time I made soup." "Really?" "Sure enough, I'm talented in everything I do. When I become a father in the future, I'll definitely be a good father." As he said this, he laughed foolishly and said, "Do you think it will be 5 boys or 5 girls?" Lily almost choked. She elbowed him and laughed out loud. "Get lost. I think 3 girls and 2 boys would be better," Oming said with a serious face. "In that case, our family will have 3 little princesses and 2 little knights." "Why not a prince?" "The prince is the princess's partner. You can't have him so casually." Lily couldn't help but smile. She looked up and saw his bright and deep peach blossom eyes. She put down the bowl in her hand and hugged him. "Thank you, Oming." The gentleness on Oming's face deepened. He held her in his arms and whispered, "Are you thanking me for giving you such a handsome husband? Go away, shameless." Lily patted him and smiled. "I thought I wouldn't be able to have children in the future. Ever since the twins, don't mention that." Oming covered her mouth and said, "The quintuplets will be angry." Lily was speechless. "What's with that look? The quintuplets will really be angry." Oming smiled brightly and lowered his head to kiss her lips. "Don't think about the unhappy things in the past. Those 2 children are not fated with us. In the future, we will have more children. Dash. Chapter 1460. I hope so. Lily leaned against Oming's chest, feeling a little guilty. The arrival of this child was a little sudden, and her heart had always had a kind of surreal feeling. It was another night of overtime. It had been a week since Oming and Lily had gotten married. Yu hadn't seen Li Jinan for a week. She had heard that Li Jinan had been on a business trip abroad and was very busy. Many people hadn't seen him and didn't know where he had gone. In fact, even she didn't know about it. Yu's feelings had been a little complicated these days. Perhaps it was a common problem for humans. They would always pay attention to someone they had slept with, even though she knew it was impossible for her to be with him. The lack of any news made her very concerned. Yu tried hard to put those thoughts aside and went out. Just as she hailed a cab, she received a text message on her phone. It was from a familiar number. "Shun Luoen, do you have time these days? I have something to discuss with you." Yu stared at the number for a long time, before closing the page. Her phone vibrated again. It's about the divorce. Yi Yu was stunned. Shen Luo wants to divorce me? She stared at the string of words for a long time. An inexplicable feeling rose in her heart. Am I finally going to be liberated? But deep in her heart, there was a ferment of pain. Wave after wave, it gripped the tip of her heart, and it was difficult to bear. Tears welled up in her eyes, and Yi Yu laughed out loud. She stared at the string of words on her phone and took a deep breath. Let's get divorced. Everyone will feel better after a divorce. But this time he wants a divorce. Who is it because of? Shen Manting? Or Guan Kui? Yi Yu felt a little upset and replied, When? Shen Luo, and as soon as possible. Ha! Yi Yu returned home, took a shower, and collapsed in a bed. She slept until dawn. The next day, she went to the office and applied for leave from the HR manager. Her leave was quickly approved, and she bought the fastest ticket back to the capital. It was another foggy day. At a glance, it was all gray. This is the capital. Just like the people in the imperial capital, no one could see through them. She called Shen Luo, but he seemed to be busy. After a long time, he picked up the phone. Hello, have you arrived? Yeah, I'm at the airport. Where can I find you? Yi Yu went straight to the point. There was silence on the other end. She waited for a few seconds before asking, What's wrong? Are you that impatient? Shen Luo, Anne's voice, seemed to carry a hint of bitterness. His indescribable emotions seeped into her heart. Her heart ached, and she felt a lump in her throat. She almost couldn't hold back her tears. The feelings they had built up over the years couldn't just disappear like that. For many years, she had dreamed of marrying her beloved brother Luo. However, the grievances she had suffered over the past few years would not vanish just because of a few words from him. When he hated and resented her because of Guan Kui, when he abandoned her because of Shen Manting, she would also be in pain. When there was no trust in a relationship, there was no need to continue it, no matter what their relationship was. Chapter 1461. Yeah, I'm at the hospital. Come to the hospital. Shen Luo added, This is the hospital you came to the last time. With that, he hung up. Yi Yu laughed bitterly. The last hospital was the one Guan Kui had been in. His meaning couldn't be any clearer. Shen Luo was with Guan Kui. Yi Yu hailed a cab to the hospital. She quickly found the ward she had been to the last time she had visited. Inside the ward, Guan Kui sat in her wheelchair. In her hands was a beautiful white wedding gown. Her face was filled with a blissful smile as she asked, Mommy, do you think I look good in this wedding gown? The wedding dress was huge. It was adorned with extravagantly beautiful, sparkling diamonds. She gestured to herself and looked at Yi Tian with a radiant smile. Shen Luo bought me this wedding dress. I love it so much. Yi Tian looked at Guan Kui warmly and took the wedding dress from her with both hands. She gestured to Guan Kui and said, When Shen Luo comes back, Mommy will help you change into this. We'll wear it for him to see. Yi Yu felt a dull pain in her chest. She stopped at the door of the ward and looked in. She saw her biological mother smiling warmly in front of another girl. Her heart was numb. Hadn't I been like this all these years? It didn't seem to make any difference. The sound of leather shoes came from behind her. It was the sound of calm and steady footsteps. Yi Yu turned her head. At a glance, she saw a face that she was all too familiar with. Shen Luo seemed much more tired than the last time they had met. His cheeks were sunken, and there were dark circles under his eyes. There was a faint green ring around his lips. He looked much more haggard. He must have had a hard time these past few days. Was it because of Shen Manting? Or was it because of Guan Kui? Or was it because of me? Yi Yu couldn't help but laugh at that thought. Shen Luo looked at her and asked, You're here? Looking at Shen Luo, and Yi Yu's lips curled up into a smile as she said, Isn't that obvious? When can we sign? I'm very busy. Shen Luo gazed deeply into her eyes. Then he averted his gaze and looked inside. Guan Kui and Yi Tian were both looking in their direction. It was obvious that they had noticed their presence. Guan Kui waved at Shen Luo and smiled sweetly. Shen Luo smiled gently at her and said, Let's do it now. You'll be free in the future. Her eyes were looking at Guan Kuei, but her words were directed at Yi Yuyu. She suddenly thought of what Shen Luo and had said on the phone just now. Are you that impatient? Yi Yuyu's heart sank. When she reached the Civil Affairs Bureau, Yi Yuyu took out the marriage certificate that she had treasured for a long time. When she replaced it with a divorce certificate, her heart didn't waver at all, as if that was how it should be. When they left the Civil Affairs Bureau together, he seemed to be in a terrible mood. As soon as he stepped out of the door, he lit up a cigarette in frustration. Originally, Shen Luo and did not like to smoke. When Yi Yuyu saw the way Shen Luo and was smoking, the first person that came to mind was Li Jinan. Li Jinan was the most good-looking man she had ever seen smoking. Shen Luo and noticed that she was a little distracted. Annoyed, he took a step forward and held her arm. Chapter 1462. Shen Luo and looked into her eyes with a violent rage. His grip on her arm tightened as he said, Yi Yu, don't you like me very much? Don't you love me? Why do you change so quickly? When Yi Yu heard that, she looked into his eyes. Her initial helplessness slowly faded. When he saw the look in Yi Yu's eyes, Shen Luo An's heart grew colder. This pair of eyes that used to light up whenever they looked at him, this pair of eyes that used to smile whenever they saw him. Now, how did it change? Everything was different from before. Shen Luo An's grip on her hand tightened. An indescribable emotion welled up in his chest, threatening to burst out. Mr. Shen, please conduct yourself with dignity. Yi Yu's voice was calm and distant as she waved her hand away. Shen Luo An's grip on her hand didn't loosen in the slightest. Yi Yu looked into his eyes with a hint of sarcasm. What do you mean by this? Get her ex-wife back? What about the one in the hospital? She can't take any provocation now. She had heard about Guan Kuei's illness. Even under such circumstances, Shen Luo and was willing to divorce her and marry Guan Kuei. After all these years, he had treated her with true love. Yi Yu's face was full of sarcasm. It made Shen Luo An's heart ache. Suddenly, he felt a lump in his throat. Shen Luo and looked at the woman in front of him. Her eyes were still the same, but the distance between them had grown further and further apart. The childhood sweetheart he had once been so familiar with had become a stranger in the blink of an eye. They looked at each other without a word. Looking back, all that was left was the distance between them. Yi Yu. Shen Luo An's voice was a little hoarse. He held the cigarette between his fingers. The smoke rose into the air and clouded his eyes. Do you still love me? Yi Yu stared at him for a moment before softly replying, I did. Shen Luo and had gotten the answer he wanted. It was just that his heart felt even more empty. He released Yi Yu's hand and laughed bitterly. He put out the cigarette in the trash can beside him. Then, he got into his car and headed in the direction of the hospital. Yi Yu watched his back view from behind. Her heart couldn't help but tremble. Do you still love me? On countless nights, Yi Yu would ask herself the same question. Do you still love Shen Luo? Still love. However, she could no longer afford to love him. Goodbye, Shen Luo. Yi Yu stood rooted to the spot for a long time before taking a step forward. However, just as she was about to move, a black Bentley by the roadside whistled. Yi Yu looked in the direction of the voice and saw half a face peeking out from the window of the back seat. Her eyebrows were exquisite like a painting, and her lines were cold and firm. At this moment, a pair of phoenix eyes were looking straight at him, calm and profound. It was faint, but it made Yi Yu's heart flutter. She walked over. Before she reached the car, the chauffeur opened the door for her. Until they sat down, no one spoke. There was a faint scent of aromatherapy in the Bentley. As Yi Yu sat, she couldn't help but look out the window. Among the cars coming and going, there were also many men and women who were about to divorce or had already divorced, driving side by side. But what were their feelings like? She turned her head to look at Li Jinan and asked, How did you know I was here? Chapter 1463. Li Jinan remained nonchalant. He glanced at her and replied, I was just passing by. Yi Yu didn't believe him. She turned to look at him. Her face was pale. In his palm, there was a dark red book. The words divorce certificate were written on it. Li Jinnan's mood improved. Let's go eat. What do you want to eat? Li Jinnan moved closer to her and held her tightly clenched hand. Yi Yu's hand stiffened. She instinctively wanted to withdraw her hand. However, Li Jinnan's grip tightened. Without a word, he flipped open the dark red booklet in her hand. When he saw Yi Yu's photo on the booklet, he felt relieved. Yi Yu looked at him and allowed him to hold the divorce certificate. Li Jinnan didn't look well either. His eyes were dark, and his facial features were more pronounced than they had been a week ago. He had lost weight. However, compared to Shenluo, his condition was undoubtedly much better. I don't feel like eating. Yi Yu turned her head to look out the window. She was feeling a little down. Oh, right. GM Li, I want to resign. Li Jinnan paused in the middle of flipping through the divorce certificate. He glanced sideways and saw her frail back. He closed the divorce certificate and asked, why? I don't want to work anymore. You don't think I'm being treated well? No, I just want to change places. I don't want to stay in Kingstown anymore. I want to have some fun on my own for a while. Yu kept looking out the window. The scenery flashed past her so quickly that it made her dizzy. Where are you going? I don't know. Yu turned her head to look at him and smiled. She was probably going to a place far away where no one knew her and start over. Regardless of whether it was Kingstown or the capital, no one needed her anymore. She had once thought that the mother she loved the most in her life had become someone else's mother. The man she had once loved the most was about to marry Guan Kui and hated her to the core. She had no feelings for the Shun family, and even less for the Guan family. As for Kingstown, Yi Qianqian could go find her own happiness. She would only do some trivial work in the company and could be replaced at any time. No one needed her anymore. At that thought, Yi Yu's heart ached. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she quickly suppressed them and turned to look out the window. Li Jinnan could tell that she was in a bad mood. He put the divorce certificate back and nodded. That's fine too. I'll go with you. Yi Yu's heart tightened. She shook her head and said, there's no need. You still have a lot of work to do in the company. I can't hold you up. It's okay. I have my brother. He had complete trust in Li Xiqing's ability. Yi Yu was speechless. After a long time, she finally said, I want to go alone. Just pretend that I don't exist. If you're happy, just pay attention to me. If you're not, just ignore me. Yi Yu was speechless. How could she ignore such a big man? Li Jinnan acted as if he hadn't noticed her resistance and asked, do you want to go to the country or overseas? There's a starlight town in New Zealand. I heard that it's very beautiful. During the day, it's filled with birds and fragrant flowers. At night, the sky is filled with stars, and there are fireflies flying in the air. It's like being in a fairyland. Chapter 1464. When I grow up, I want to go to New Zealand. I heard that there's a small town called Starlight. During the day, it's full of birds and flowers. At night, wow, there's a sky full of stars. There are fireflies everywhere. It's so beautiful. It was just like the plot of an anime. Brother Luo, can you take me there next time? Back then, Shun Luo smiled and lowered his eyes to look at her. There was an indescribable tenderness in his eyes. He nodded and said, as long as our Yu is happy. The words were still the same, so familiar. However, the person sitting beside her had changed. His heart felt like it was being gripped by a devil's claw. It was so unbearable that he couldn't breathe. Yi Yu's vision blurred, but she quickly lowered her head and turned her head away. She didn't want him to see her pathetic state. Li Jinnan didn't say anything else. He just sat there quietly. Soon, the driver sent them to a restaurant. He got out of the car first and opened the door for her. Yi Yu hesitated for a moment before walking down. She casually ordered a few dishes. She didn't eat much before claiming that she was full. Li Jinnan was not in a hurry. He ate slowly, wiped the corner of his mouth, and said, I'll send you back later. Let's go back to Kingstown together, Yi Yu suggested. Li Jinnan hadn't expected Yi Yu to say that. He was stunned for a moment before nodding his head. Okay. Everything seemed very harmonious and quiet. When they arrived at the airport, Li Jinnan asked for Yi Yu's identification. After they bought their plane tickets, they returned to Kingstown together. Li Jinnan's chauffeur had been waiting outside the airport for a long time. After sending Yi Yu upstairs, Li Jin turned to leave. When Yu returned to her room and looked out the window, she realized that the car didn't leave immediately. It stayed for a while before slowly driving away. He looked at the time. Yi Qianqian must have been working overtime. It was already past the time to get off work, but she still hadn't returned. It was a big house with 2 bedrooms and a living room, but it was a little empty. For some reason, Yu felt a little lonely. Once this feeling surged up, it was hard to suppress. Her heart felt empty, and she subconsciously thought of Shen Luo, and Shen Luo must be happy about the divorce, right? Guan Kui and Yi Tian were the same. Her vision was blurry, and her heart felt like it was being squeezed. She couldn't stop herself from crying. She took a deep breath and wiped her face. She stood up and began to pack her luggage. After resigning, he had to go out for a walk. For so many years, she had been accommodating and tolerating. She had long had enough. But where was he going? Li Jinnan's mood was a little strange. After so many days of running around, he didn't feel as good as he had imagined when he saw them divorce. It was obvious that Yi Yu was devastated. But it didn't matter. There was still a long way to go, and things would slowly get better. However, he had to call and ask for leave as soon as possible. Li Jinan called Li Siqing. The other side seemed to be busy. The sound of children playing was very loud, and it could be heard clearly over the phone. Wrong number? Or are you looking for me? Li Siqing did not mince his words. This guy would never come to a temple without a reason. Chapter 1465. It was a romantic tourist destination with men and women of all colors. By the time Yu reached the hotel, it was already the next morning. Because she had signed up for the Freedom Travel Hotel package, the room was a huge sea view double room. Yu hung up her clothes on a hanger and put them in the closet. She changed into a new set of clothes and went to the beach. The sky was high and the sea was wide. The turquoise seawater gurgled. The sunlight shone on it, and the light reflected off the bodies of the passers-by. It was so dazzling that it made one feel hot. Yu was wearing a floor-length dress, classic beach slippers, a sun hat, and sunglasses. As she watched the tourists from all over the world frolicking and chasing each other, her mood seemed to have lightened. She ordered a glass of fruit juice and found a beach chair by the water's edge to sit down. She lifted her dress a little, and the seawater rushed up to her ankles. It was very cold, but it was very comfortable in such weather. Yu kicked it a few times and leaned back comfortably on the chair. She closed her eyes. After about 10 minutes, someone came over and said, "Miss Yi, your drink is here." It wasn't the fluent English that she had just heard. Instead, it was a deep and formal Mandarin accent. The voice was very clear and familiar. When Yu heard the voice, her eyes flew open. She turned her head and saw the determined face of a man. Li Jinan was wearing a pair of sunglasses and a plain white linen shirt. It accentuated his already bulging muscles, making them look even more well-proportioned and sexy. "Why are you here?" Yu sat up immediately and looked at him in disbelief. "You followed me?" she asked in surprise. "Of course not. I signed up for a tour with you. Have you forgotten?" Li Jinan was unruffled. He didn't seem embarrassed at all that he had been exposed. Instead, his expression was indescribably natural. He sat down beside Yu and said, "We just boarded the same plane. Didn't you see?" Yu found it a little illogical. She looked at him and said, "How is that possible? You must have been following me. How could there be such a coincidence?" "I don't know why it's such a coincidence." Li Jinan suddenly leaned in and slowly said, "Perhaps it's fate. Wherever you are, my body can't control itself and automatically follows you." When Yu heard that, she laughed angrily and said, "Nonsense. There's no such thing as fate. You're just following me." Li Jinan removed his sunglasses and chuckled as he replied, "Yeah, I'm following you. But I'm following you openly. You just didn't realize it. Don't blame me." "Excuses?" Li Jinan raised his eyebrows slightly. He raised the drink in his hand and said, "It's a vacation. Of course, it's only fun when there are at least 2 of us. If you're alone, you'll only get more bored." Yu didn't want to pay any attention to him. She snatched the drink from his hand and took a deep gulp. She sat down on the chair and stared ahead angrily. Li Jinan followed suit and sat down. He gazed into the distance. The golden sunlight sprinkled down, plating the originally clear, mirror-like surface with a layer of crystal light, magnificent and magnificent. Flocks of seagulls swept across the water, energetic and flamboyant. Everything was just perfect. He turned to look at Yi Yu and asked, "What's the point of just sitting here? Why don't I take you somewhere fun?" Dash. Chapter 1466. What? Let's go. Indeed, Li Jinan took Yi Yu to many places. The Hawaiian Islands were huge, and they had all kinds of classic attractions. It was magnificent. Yi Yu hadn't intended to go anywhere when she came there. She had only wanted to play in the water, bask in the sun, and be a quiet, salted fish. But, being led by Li Jinan all the way, she found it very refreshing and exciting. After leaving the volcano, Yi Yu's stomach was growling with hunger. Although she had bought snacks along the way to fill her stomach, it wasn't as reliable as a proper meal. Yi Yu rubbed her already rumbling stomach and said, "I'm hungry. Let's go back and eat." Li Jinan was hungry as well, but seeing how much fun Yi Yu was having, he didn't want to interrupt her. When he heard her say that, he led her to the route that they had planned out. There was a restaurant near the hotel that served Western cuisine. After Yi Yu ordered her food, she ate some appetizers. When a main course was served, she wasn't as hungry anymore. Yi Yu sipped her soup slowly and watched Li Jinan cut the steak. When Li Jinan was done cutting the steak, he picked it up and handed it to her. Yi Yu immediately picked it up and exchanged it with him. A whole steak in exchange for a cut steak. What a bargain. Yi Yu picked up the fork and started eating. She ate with relish and looked very satisfied. As she ate, she began to doze off. Li Jinan saw that and couldn't help but speed up his eating, but his posture remained elegant. In the end, when Li Jinan finished eating, Yi Yu was still eating slowly. Her eyelids were fighting to stay open. "Let's go back to the hotel," Li Jinan said. When Yi Yu heard that, she immediately shielded the plate in front of her and said, "I haven't finished eating yet." Li Jinan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "You're already so sleepy, and you still want to finish eating? Don't eat too much before bed. It's not good for your stomach." "I can still fight a little more," Yi Yu said. She picked up her fork and put 2 mouthfuls of food into her mouth. After that, she drank a mouthful of water. When she finished the food, she realized that her stomach was already bloated. Li Jinan laughed and said, "Let's go." Yi Yu put down her fork reluctantly and stood up. Perhaps it was because she was really exhausted that she couldn't even walk steadily. She stumbled and almost fell. At that critical moment, Li Jinan rushed forward to support her. Yi Yu's body fell into his arms. The man's scorching temperature was very warm. Yi Yu was beyond sleepy. She stood up straight and forced herself to walk forward. Li Jinan followed behind her silently. After paying the bill, he left with her. Just as Yi Yu was about to return to her room, she suddenly realized something very important. Yi Yu was shocked. "Oh no, what's wrong?" It was rare for Li Jinan to see her so nervous. "My handbag is missing. There are room cards, passports, and cell phones inside." It was only then that Li Jinan realized that Yi Yu had such a thing on her. The bag was about the size of a mobile phone, so it was really inconspicuous. Yi Yu began to panic. How did this happen? Am I not allowed to go back? My passport is in there too." "That won't happen," Li Jinan said. "Think about where you dropped it. We'll go back and look for it." Yi Yu was a little lost. "I don't know, Ash." Chapter 1467. Li Jinan didn't know what to do with her. In exasperation, he took out his room card and said, "Why don't you sleep in my room first? I'll go back and look for it. I have my passport with me." Yi Yu felt that it was inappropriate. She felt a little embarrassed and said, "I don't think that's a good idea. It's fine. You must be exhausted today. Rest early. Leave the rest to me." Li Jinan stuffed the room card into Yi Yu's hand and turned around. Yi Yu held the room card in her hand and stared at his back. She was a little stunned. After a long time, She turned around and followed the location of the room card to look for it. Li Jinan looked around in the direction he had come from. From what he remembered, the bag should have been white. It was about the size of a cell phone and had a long strap. However, after looking all around, he didn't see the bag. Could it have fallen into the volcanic area? Li Jinan felt that something was wrong. After calling for help, he couldn't take it anymore. For the past few days, he had been busy running around the capital. He hadn't slept since the previous day. During that time, he was either going through documents on the plane or looking for someone to play with in Hawaii. His head hurt. Li Jinan felt helpless. He had no choice but to return to the hotel and use his passport to get another room. However, the receptionist politely told him that one ID could only register for one room. Li Jinan went out for another round. He realized that all the hotels nearby were either too far away or fully booked. Apart from some of his ID, he didn't have anything else on him. After going around in circles, Li Jinan returned to the hotel he had been at. After informing the receptionist that he had lost his room card, he gave her the room number and paid for a new room card. He returned to the room Yi Yu was in. When Li Jinan opened the door, his mind was filled with thoughts of how to explain his actions to Yi Yu. Actually, he hadn't intended to stay in the same room as her. He had merely wanted her to have a good rest. However, when Li Jinan opened the door, all his words were stuck in his chest. Yi Yu was already sound asleep. She had only taken off her shoes and was curled up on the blanket. Her breathing was even. She looked very peaceful. Perhaps she was exhausted, but she didn't notice that he had entered. Li Jinan's explanation died in his throat. Seeing her posture, he suddenly felt a strange feeling in his heart. This feeling was inexplicable. Even Li Jinan himself couldn't tell what kind of emotion it was, but it began to swell violently in his heart. It had already greatly affected his emotions. Walking over quietly, Li Jinan saw the way she looked and the corners of his mouth slightly raised. He gently moved her a little, then flipped up the quilt and covered her body. Yi Yu still hadn't woken up. Her breathing was getting heavier, and she was fast asleep. Li Jinan quietly took off his shoes. He didn't dare to shower. He switched off the lights and lay down on the sofa with his eyes closed. That night, the atmosphere was very tranquil. Just like the climate in Hawaii, it was so comfortable that it made people fascinated. When Yi Yu woke up, the sky was already bright. After sleeping in the same position for so long, his body felt a little sore. Chapter 1468. Yi Yu's heart skipped a beat. She suddenly turned her head. When she saw Li Jinan, she suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. Li Jinan seemed to have heard the movement. He frowned, then opened his eyes and looked over. When he saw Yi Yu's shocked expression, he immediately sobered up. Li Jinan sat up and looked at her. "You're awake. I couldn't find your bag. One ID can only be used for one room." So, Yi Yu was a little embarrassed. She stood up and said, "GM Li, thank you." "You're welcome." Li Jinan looked at the time and said, "Let's go for breakfast." Yi Yu had a good sleep, but the dark circles under Li Jinan's eyes had deepened. Well, after sleeping on the sofa for the whole night, Yi Yu felt even more guilty, but she didn't say anything. She went straight into the bathroom to wash up and then came out. Li Jinan was on the phone. When he saw her come out, he didn't have much of a reaction. He said to the person on the phone, "Well, I have to go. Goodbye." Yi Yu felt a little strange. Staying in the same room with Li Jinan, she had a very strange feeling in her heart. It was like having an affair, although she and Shinluo and were divorced, perhaps because this idea was deeply rooted in her heart. Yi Yu couldn't get rid of it. Bah, bah, bah. What affair? Although she had slept in the same room as Li Jinan, at least nothing had happened. Yi Yu encouraged herself. By the time she put on her shoes, Li Jinan was already done. "What do you want to eat?" "I'm fine with anything." Yi Yu was very easygoing and followed Li Jinan to the dining room. There were many people with Asian skin in the dining room. Yi Yu felt very close to him. "Are you used to it?" Li Jinan opened the menu and asked casually. "It's fine. I feel quite comfortable here." Yi Yu looked around and was in a good mood. Li Jinan looked up at her and his lips were slightly raised. He seemed to be in a very good mood. After ordering something, he handed the menu to the waiter. With his long fingers crossed, Li Jinan looked at Yi Yu and said, "In the future, do you have any plans?" Yi Yu thought for a moment and shook her head. "Not at the moment. I want to play for a while. The world is still very big, and I want to see it." "Yeah." Li Jinan put his hands down and nodded his head. "This kind of life isn't bad, but I feel that young people should strive harder. At your age and in your current state, it's the best time to work hard." Yi Yu knew what he meant and asked, "You want me to act? I have a few good roles recently." Yi Yu smiled. "I think it's better to live a simple life. After I come back from my vacation, I want to learn something to enrich myself. Then, I'll find a small place with mountains and rivers to live." Such a life was poetic and beautiful. Chapter 1469. Yi Yu was stunned. She looked at Li Jinan as if she already knew what he meant. When Li Jinan met her gaze, he immediately said, "It's too boring to live alone. Humans are social animals. If you're alone, you'll be bored to death. You can get a friend to stay with you." Yi Qianqian was speechless. "I'll get a dog and let it watch the sunrise and sunset with me." When Yi Yu said that, she couldn't maintain the expression on her face. Her hands trembled slightly as they rested on the table. "When the time comes, we'll get a dog together and watch the sunrise and sunset together." His warm and mellow voice seemed to ring in her ears. The same words were said again, but they had changed from "we" to "me." Li Jinan sensed that something was wrong with her mood and didn't continue. He began to reflect on himself. Was I too anxious? Yi Yu's emotions had clearly not stabilized. Divorcing Shen Luo and seemed to be a huge blow to her. Shen Luo and Li Jinan's eyes were as bright as the stars in the night sky. They darkened as he said, "How can a dog be fun? A person can be fun as they please." At that moment, a yellow-skinned waiter walked over with a tray of food. When he heard that, he chuckled. Yi Yu's face suddenly turned red. She glared at him. The sadness in her heart immediately turned into anger. She said, "How can you be so bad? Am I bad?" Li Jinan looked as if he didn't know what was going on. "What are you thinking about?" Yi Yu took the toast and took a bite. She decided not to talk to him anymore. Li Jinan didn't give in and said, "How can your thoughts be so bad? And to think that you're a girl." Yi Yu was so angry that her masseter muscles tightened. She growled, "Isn't that what you mean?" "Yes." Li Jinan admitted it openly. Yi Yu choked on her toast. She glared at him with an expression that said she wanted to strangle him. Li Jinan immediately handed her the water. Slowly, Yi Yu took 2 large gulps. She was so angry that her chest hurt. "Are you angry?" Li Jinan chuckled. "That won't do. We still have to go out to play later. I'll be embarrassed if you do this." Yi Yu had originally been angry, but when she heard his cheerful voice, her anger evaporated. She glared at him and retorted, "Who wants to hang out with you? Hey, you're not even giving me a chance to redeem myself now." Li Jinan looked a little exasperated. He picked up a sandwich and asked, "Do you want a sandwich?" "Not eating. I want to eat bread." "Order it yourself." Yi Yu didn't stand on ceremony. She held the bread in her hand tightly. Li Jinan stared ahead, but his eyes weren't on the bread. They were on Yi Yu. His aggressive gaze made Yi Yu feel uncomfortable. She said, "Don't look at me." Li Jinan laughed and remarked, "You look good." Yi Yu felt that she had been praised, and her mood improved. Before she could react, Li Jinan leaned over and took a bite of her bread. His warm and moist lips even grazed her palm. Yi Yu's body stiffened. She suddenly shivered and froze on the spot. Li Jinan chewed. As if he hadn't noticed Yi Yu's reaction, he said, "Not bad." Chapter 1470. Yi Yu saw his deep gaze and blushed. She put the bread back on the plate and said, Li Jinan reached his hand out to take it and said, "Thank you." Just as he was about to say thank you, Yi Yu stopped him with a slap of her hand. Yi Yu was a little angry as she asked, "What are you doing? Didn't you give the bread to me to eat? It would be a waste not to have it." "No way. Let go of it." If she gave it to Li Jinan now, wouldn't he end up eating the place where she had eaten? That's so disgusting. "No." When Li Jinan heard that, he looked at her hand and said, "You're the one who's taking advantage of me." Yi Yu immediately retracted her hand. He picked up the toast and began to eat it in a leisurely manner. Yi Yu's face burned. She had never imagined that Li Jinan, who looked so decent, would act like a hooligan. Furthermore, he was trying to steal her food. How despicable. Li Jinan acted as if he hadn't seen it. He pushed the sandwich over and said, "I don't like sandwiches." Yi Yu had already eaten half of the toast. Her stomach was already half full. When she saw the sandwich in its entirety, she knew that she wouldn't be able to finish it. The other half of the toast had already been eaten by Li Jinan. Other than the sausages and biscuits, she didn't have anything else to eat. She picked up the sandwich angrily. After 2 bites, Yi Yu felt sick of it. The sandwiches at this place were really poorly made. It was no wonder that Li Jinan refused to eat it. TSK, what a scheming man. After putting the sandwich down, Yi Yu continued to eat the sausages. She picked up the knife and fork and cut the sausages into 8 pieces, just like Li Jinan. She felt much better. After a few bites, she suddenly realized that the sandwich in front of her had disappeared. She looked up and saw Li Jinan eating the sandwich that she had just eaten. "Didn't you say that you didn't like it?" Yi Yu growled through gritted teeth. Li Jinan didn't even look up as he replied, "You're too wasteful. Who asked me to be with you? I can only eat the leftovers." Yi Yu became even angrier and retorted, "You were the one who stole my bread. Of course I can't finish so many sandwiches. But you can eat the grilled sausage," Li Jinan said calmly and glanced at her. "TSK, you obviously don't want to eat it. You don't want to eat it either. So I gave it to you. If you don't want it, then give it to me. Do you think I'm a good-for-nothing? No, I'm just being modest. Bah, you obviously don't want to eat it. Aren't I eating right now?" Li Jinan looked at her with a straight face and asked, "How can you distort the truth?" Yi Yu was speechless. She finally understood that there was actually such a shameless person in this world. She couldn't even win an argument against such a fellow, and she was even called a thief by a thief. Yi Yu laughed in exasperation and said, "I didn't expect you to be so eloquent. Just so. Li Jinan said humbly. He then continued, "I'm just a little better than you." Yi Yu viciously stabbed the fork into a piece of intestine. She picked it up and bit down hard. She deliberately didn't bite through it and tore it apart. Li Jinan's throat tightened as he watched. His mouth felt dry. Chapter 1471. Li Jinan quickly lowered his head. He was shocked by his own reaction. On the other hand, Yi Yu assumed that her threat had successfully intimidated Li Jinan. Her initial anger dissipated by a large margin. Li Jinan finished the rest of his food in silence. He took a deep breath to calm himself down and said, "Let's go." Oomph. Yi Yu leisurely took a sip of water and stood up. Without a word, she led the way. The two of them first went to the embassy to report the loss of their passports. Unexpectedly, there were many people in the embassy. They queued for a while, and half the day passed just like that. By the time the two of them came out, it was already afternoon. The two of them were in much better shape than they had been the night before. It was just a pity that they didn't have a place to play. In the end, they unanimously decided to go to Binhai Bar. There were quite a number of bars in Binhai. There were many people inside, and every bar was very lively. It was Li Jinan's first time visiting a bar in a foreign country. There were people from all over the world, and all of them were talking in different languages. It was a good thing that the host of the bar was speaking English, so they didn't have to be at a loss for words. Many of the people who came were tourists from all over the country. They were very enthusiastic and open. When they saw Li Jinan, a blonde woman whistled at him. She was wearing a sexy bikini and walked over to Li Jinan. In broken Mandarin, she asked, "Hey, are you from China?" Li Jinan's face was expressionless. He nodded his head and didn't reply. When a woman saw that, she leaned forward and asked, "Are you alone?" She seemed to be unable to continue. She quickly reverted to fluent American English and said, "Do you want to join us for a drink? I'm sitting over there. My friends and I are there." Li Jinan looked in the direction she was pointing and immediately saw a large group of foreigners. They were both black and white people. Many of them were whistling and waving in their direction. It was as if they were looking forward to it. Yi Yu squeezed through the crowd and saw that Li Jinan was being hit on. She shook her head and clicked her tongue. Indeed, a good-looking person would stand out no matter where he went. When Li Jinan saw the scene, he frowned. He didn't really interact with strangers, especially since his English wasn't that good. Just as he was about to reject the offer, he caught a glimpse of a petite figure hidden in the middle of the crowd, looking in his direction. Li Jinan took a step forward and pulled Yi Yu over. He told the woman, "I'm not alone. I'm with my girlfriend." Yi Yu was a little confused. She was firmly held in his arms. When she saw the surprised look on the American girl's face, she laughed dryly and reached out her hand to greet. "Hello." The blonde beauty laughed and said, "That's even better. We really like playing with Chinese people. Your Chinese language is very interesting, and your Chinese people are also very good-looking. We like Chinese people. Miss, I'm Tina." The beauty extended her hand to Yi Yu with a bright smile. Yi Yu instinctively reached out to shake his hand. With a smile, she replied, "Yo-yo." With that, she pointed at Li Jinan and said, "My boss, Nan." Chapter 1472. Li Jinan's hand remained in front of Yi Yu's chest. His arm was muscular and strong. His black short-sleeved t-shirt accentuated his figure perfectly. The lines of his muscles made one's blood boil. When she heard Li Jinan's sudden question, Yi Yu laughed and immediately denied it. No, it was obvious that the beauty was interested in Li Jinan. There was no way she was going to stand in the way of Li Jinan's romance. When the beauty saw that they each had their own version of events, she understood and said, "Okay, everyone is having fun. Come, let's have some fun together." With that, she reached out and pulled Yi Yu over. As Yi Yu was being pulled away, she didn't forget to turn back and tug on Li Jinan. Li Jinan was pulled along, and naturally, they walked over. A bunch of people were sitting together and reveling. In front of them were bottles of alcohol. The alcohol they were drinking wasn't beer or anything like that. Instead, it was bottles of liquor that looked like it had a high alcohol content. Whiskey, XO. When Li Jinan saw that, he felt that something was amiss. He pulled Yi Yu up and said, "Don't drink with strangers." When Yi Yu was pulled, she felt that it was inappropriate as well. However, the beauty pulled her over to sit with a group of girls. Li Jinan frowned and said, "Tell them that we're leaving." Li Jinan wasn't good at English. He could understand and speak a little, but he wasn't fluent. Yi Yu quickly relayed the message and said, "My boss doesn't like to hang out with strangers." "Hey, don't be like that, my China friend. We like China friends. It's fine if you don't drink. Can you tell me what's fun in China?" A burly man with a full beard walked over. He reeked of smoke and alcohol, but his eyes were clear and bright. He looked friendly. The moment he walked over, he hooked his arm around Li Jinan's shoulder and said, "Wow, you're so tall. You don't look like a China person at all." Li Jinan was 1.9 meters tall. Indeed, he was considered very tall in China. "It's all right, GM Li, sit down. If you can't continue the conversation, we'll just leave." Yi Yu counted the number of people. There were 5 women and 3 men. The women all had good figures, but they didn't have any obvious muscles. They were all dressed skimpily. It was obvious that they were there to have fun. As for the men, one of them had already put on some weight, and the other 2 looked younger. They were tender and looked like a boiled chicken. Li Jinan would definitely be able to defeat them. More importantly, the American lady was very pretty. It was obvious that she was interested in Li Jinan. Why not help him look for her? What if Li Jinan ended up liking her? As Yi Yu thought about it, the image of Li Jinan standing together with the girl appeared in her mind. Although he was from a foreign country, at least he was better than a divorced woman, right? Yi Yu's heart ached a little, but at the same time, she felt an inexplicable sense of relief. He beckoned Li Jinan over and said, "GM Li, come over and have a seat." Li Jinan could tell that Yi Yu was looking forward to it. He stood there for a moment before walking over and sitting down next to Yi Yu. Yi Yu said in English, "We don't drink, but I can tell you she talked about traditional culture, the 8 major cuisines, and the various historical classics." Li Jinan listened to her speak. Yi Yu's English had a Chinese accent, so Li Jinan could understand her completely. The group gathered around and listened attentively. After talking for a long time, Yi Yu began to feel thirsty. She asked, "Is there any water?" Chapter 1473. Yi Yu's mouth was very dry. When she heard that there was only alcohol, she didn't dare drink it. She said, "Forget it, have a seat. I'll go get it." Li Jinan stood up and quickly walked away. Yi Yu nodded her head and continued talking to them. A girl beside her brought over a bottle of drink and said, "Have some to quench your thirst. There's no water or drinks in this bar. You'll have to walk a little further to the rest stop in front." Yi Yu glanced at it. It was a glass of green liquid. It looked like it was steaming. It was probably soda. Yi Yu took it from her and thanked her. She took a sip and realized that it tasted of alcohol. It was very faint, but it was definitely there. She asked, "Is this a cocktail?" "Yes. The alcohol content is very low. It's fine. You won't get drunk." The girls waved their hands as they spoke. They began to tell Yi Yu about the customs of Chicago. As Yi Yu listened, she felt even thirstier. She almost finished the cocktail. Her alcohol tolerance wasn't bad. One bottle of cocktail wasn't enough to get her drunk. Yi Yu didn't take it to heart at all. When Li Jinan came in with a bottle of water, he saw the nearly empty bottle in front of her. His brows immediately furrowed together, and he asked, "What did you drink?" "A little cocktail." Yi Yu noticed that Li Jinan's expression wasn't too good. "It's fine. Everyone is just chatting and having fun. They don't have any ill intentions toward us. It's not as chaotic as you think." It wasn't that Li Jinan was afraid of what they would do, but he was exasperated by Yi Yu's lack of vigilance. He said, "How dare you mess around when I'm not around? If they put something in there, it'll be no laughing matter." With that, he walked in and sat down beside Yi Yu. The group of Americans didn't understand what Li Jinan had just said, but they could tell from his expression that he wasn't happy. They looked at each other and shrugged their shoulders innocently. Li Jinan had bought quite a number of drinks, including various flavors of fruit juice and mineral water. He placed them on the table and said, "Have some water." The group of people had been thinking about how to lighten the mood. When they heard Li Jinan's words, they didn't stand on ceremony. They each took a bottle and said, "It's boring to keep talking. Let's play something interesting." Yi Yu's interest was piqued. After chatting for a while, she found this group of people very interesting. She asked, "What do you want to play?" "Look, they're a couple from California, and they're sisters from Chicago. Everyone is the same. We don't know each other except for our names. So, Nan, you don't have to be too wary of us. We are all here to have fun, so don't be too nervous." Tina waved her hand and said, "Yo-Yo is very cute, but her boyfriend is too strict. Yo-Yo will be unhappy." Those words were, of course, directed at Li Jinan. Li Jinan understood. He opened a bottle of mineral water and responded. Yi Yu quickly explained, "That's what he is, but he's not my boyfriend. He's my, what are we playing?" Li Jinan interrupted her and asked. Chapter 1474. When they heard the suggestion, many people were eager to give it a try. Tina looked at Li Jinan and asked, "Hey, Nan, do you want to join us?" Li Jinan took a sip of water and glanced at Yi Yu. Yi Yu didn't know whether it was better to play along or to think it over. She didn't mind playing with this group of people, but it was a little weird to play with Li Jinan. What if they asked some very restricted questions? What should he do? When Li Jinan saw Yi Yu's hesitation, he agreed without hesitation and said, "Yeah, I'll do it." Yi Yu thought about it and nodded her head. Tina was very enthusiastic. She quickly packed up her things and picked up a bottle of whiskey to spin. The mouth of the bottle spun rapidly. When it finally slowed down, everyone's eyes were fixed on the mouth of the bottle. Unfortunately, Tina was the first person to be spun. Tina shrugged her shoulders and stuck out her tongue. She said, "Oh, what bad luck. I've done myself in. I choose Dare." "Yo-ho!" A man whistled and exclaimed, "Tina's the best." A girl looked at Tina mischievously and asked, "Dare, is it? In that case, can you go on stage and take off your clothes before coming back?" When he heard the word Dare, Li Jinan frowned. Yi Yu felt a little excited as well. However, Yu had a natural inclination for adventure. She could totally accept this kind of excitement. Tina didn't seem to mind and replied, oh, of course. With that, she walked up to the stage where everyone was singing and dancing. The stage was filled with the band and dance troops. When they saw Tina climb up, they were all a little surprised. Just as they were about to chase Tina away, she lifted her top and winked seductively at her friends. That direction. Perhaps it was a coincidence, but it happened to be Li Jinan. All the men and women in the audience looked over and cheered. Tina lifted her top and quickly took it off, revealing her sexy figure. On her healthy, wheat-colored skin, the curves of her curves were perfect. Her waistline was alluring, and her voluptuous breasts were supported by her bra. Her cleavage was snow-white and sexy. She attracted the attention of many people. The crowd was in an uproar. Tina, on the other hand, did a somersault and walked down the stage. Surrounded by a group of people trying to strike up a conversation, he walked back without any distractions. Yu admired her and looked at her figure enviously. She praised, "You have a great figure." Before Tina could say anything, Li Jinan spoke up first and said, "Yours is better than hers." Li Jinan said in English, and everyone laughed. Tina also smiled and said, "I really want to see it. I'll definitely take yours off later." Yuyu's face reddened. She nudged Li Jinan with her elbow and said, "Don't spout nonsense. It is indeed better than her. I don't like this kind of body." Li Jinan looked straight ahead. His gaze quickly landed on Yu and said, "I like your meaty type. It's comfortable to the touch." Yuyu's face turned even redder. She reached out and pinched his arm. Seeing their actions, the crowd became a little dubious. Someone asked, "Yo-Yo, didn't you say that he's your boss?" Yu smiled awkwardly and nodded her head. Just as she was about to speak, he interrupted again and said, "He's my boyfriend." Chapter 1475. Yu began to suspect that Tina had done it on purpose. It had just been Tina, and now it was Li Jinan's turn. No matter how she looked at it, it was too much of a coincidence. Tina shrugged and said, Oh, Nan, it's your turn. Dare or truth?" "It's the truth." Li Jinan was very calm. He merely glanced at Tina. Tina looked at Yu and asked, "Yo-Yo, do you have any questions?" No. She didn't have much interest in his private life, nor did she want to know about his past, because she seemed to already know that the love life of a soldier should be a blank. Otherwise, he wouldn't have thought of taking responsibility for his first time. Before Tina could say anything, a girl beside her said eagerly, "Mr. Nan, have you ever had a girlfriend? How many times and at what age?" "Yes, once, 29 yuan," Li Jinan answered simply and to the point. When Yu heard that, she was a little shocked. She used her fingers to calculate his age. Li Jinan seems to be 29 at the moment. Up until now, Li Jinan hadn't had any other woman by his side other than her. In other words, now, himself? What? How could this be? When the girl heard that, she asked, "How old is Mr. Nan now?" One truth can only answer one question, and I've already answered 3. Li Jinan took a sip of water and rejected her unhurriedly. The girl didn't feel embarrassed at all. Instead, the way she looked at Li Jinan became even more infatuated. She said in English, "I always thought that Chinese men were weak and cultured. I didn't expect there to be such a manly man. Oh my God, the Chinese men that I've come into contact with in the past were all weak." His voice was not loud, but his emotions were extremely agitated. Li Jinan ignored her and turned the bottle. Since he was using more strength than Tina, his speed was naturally much faster. After a long time, he finally stopped and turned to the fattest of the 3 American men. The bearded man covered his face in disbelief, his face full of grief and indignation. His wife, who was sitting next to him, immediately turned around and glared at him. She asked, "Truth or dare?" "Oh no, I choose dare." "No, you have to choose the truth. Otherwise, you can't go back to California." His wife looked a little fierce, but her tone was very calm as she threatened him. The bearded middle-aged man pressed his face flat and said helplessly, "All right, I choose truth." Have you ever slept with our neighbor, Annalise? Of course not. The bearded man screamed out of reflex. He looked at her in disbelief and said, How could you think that? Annalise is the mother of 3 children. She has such a big belly and so much meat on her body. How could I like her? My wife is so beautiful. Why would I look for that kind of woman? Really? Then what were you nervous about just now? I'm afraid that you'll ask me where my private money is hidden. Oh no, I seem to have missed something. The bearded man immediately covered his mouth, and everyone around him burst into laughter. Yu smiled and looked at them enviously. This kind of love, even though it was noisy, but the days passed very comfortably. This man seemed to be afraid of his wife, but was he really afraid? Chapter 1476. After fooling around for a while, the bearded man quickly spun the bottle again. Everyone was filled with anticipation and fear. Under everyone's anticipation, the bottle finally turned to another American girl. Perhaps it was because Americans were more open-minded, but after a moment of surprise, the bottle turned to another American girl. Oh dear. Tina smiled wickedly and asked, Do you like bananas? The girl immediately understood what Tina was getting at. She covered her face in disbelief and said, No. Quite a number of people started to make a ruckus. The men even started to whistle. Tina picked up a banana and winked at the girl. She said, Use your best move to eat it. Make it more seductive. Go for it. No. The girl was extremely resistant and said, I don't think that's appropriate. It's your choice to choose dare. If you're so uninhibited, why did you choose this? Quick, quick, quick. The girl was on the verge of tears. She had no choice but to hold the banana in her hand and slowly peel it. Everyone focused their attention on her. The girl quickly released herself. Her eyes were seductive as she stuck out her tongue and gently licked the top of the banana. The tip of her tongue was sharp and nimble. It wrapped around the banana and slowly began to lick it. Her movements were light, wild, and indescribably seductive. Yiyu's face turned red as she watched. The scene was like one of those pornographic films that she and Yi Qianqian had secretly watched. In fact, it was even more explicit and made her feel even more embarrassed. There were only a few men at the scene. Their expressions were a little strange as they stared at the girl, unable to take their eyes off her. The bearded man's eyes were covered by his wife, but the other 2 didn't bother to hide their eyes. Yiyu's heart was filled with disgust. She instinctively looked at Li Jinan. Li Jinan's expression was the same as usual. He watched the girl lick the banana without any change in expression. As if sensing Yiyu's gaze, Li Jinan quickly turned his head and looked at her. Yiyu asked softly, Is it nice? All men like to watch such things, don't they? Even as a woman, she found it very entertaining. Unexpectedly, Li Jinan didn't look in her direction and replied, It's so. The woman licked the banana until it was burnt, and saliva dripped down her chin. She was full of eroticism and lust. Yiyu looked at the woman and gulped. For some reason, she felt uncomfortable. A seductive feeling came from the depths of his bones, just like when he sneakily watched porn. Too powerful. Yiyu felt a little thirsty. She picked up a drink and opened it. She took a sip and quietly turned her head to look at Li Jinan. Unexpectedly, it was as if Li Jinan hadn't shifted his gaze from the beginning. In the blink of an eye, he was looking right at her. Yiyu's heart skipped a beat. Very quickly, hot air rose to her ears. He averted his eyes and pretended not to see anything, pretending to be calm and at ease. The woman threw away the banana that was licked into a mess, shrugged, and said, Oh no, this is really embarrassing. The 2 men, who had been watching the entire time, had already raised their hands up high. The way they looked at her was dyed with a slightly different color, and they whistled. This was a top-grade chick. Perhaps all men would want to spend some time with such a woman. Chapter 1477. The exquisite girl acted as if she hadn't seen the silent invitation from the 2 men. She quickly spun the bottle. Very quickly, the mouth of the bottle landed on Yiyu. The exciting moment had come to an end. When everyone saw that it was Yiyu, They lost all their enthusiasm. They all knew that Yi Yu would never choose dare. As expected, Yi Yu announced without hesitation, truth. Everyone had already expected that. They didn't have much hope for this flat and introverted Chinese girl. Tina looked at Li Jinan and asked, Nan, is there anything you'd like to ask? Are you sleepy? Li Jinan looked at Yi Yu. Let's go back. He had spoken in Mandarin, so no one understood him. Yi Yu was taken aback. She asked, Isn't it a little early? It's already 1 a.m. I'm sleepy. Li Jinan stood up and said, This kind of game isn't suitable for us. Yi Yu agreed. Most importantly, Li Jinan wasn't enjoying himself. Compared to the previous time at his friend's bar, Li Jinan was a lot more active. Yi Yu still stood up and said, I'm sorry, but we have to go back. Everyone was surprised when they heard that. Hey, why so soon? Tina said, Yo-Yo, you haven't answered the truth yet. If it doesn't ask, I'll ask. Yi Yu and Li Jinan stopped in their tracks and looked over. Tina looked at Yi Yu and asked, Do you love Nan? Yi Yu hadn't expected Tina to ask such a question. She paused for a moment, feeling both surprised and embarrassed. Faced with everyone's gaze, Yi Yu thought for a moment and decided to tell the truth. No. Li Jinan's expression darkened. He turned his head. His eyes were as sharp as swords as they shot toward her. He reached out and pulled Yi Yu over. His action was a little forceful as he pulled her out of the bar. It was sweltering outside. Everything around them seemed to be repressing and restraining themselves, just like Li Jinan. Li Jinan's footsteps were swift as he pulled Yi Yu ahead of him. It was difficult for Yi Yu to keep up. Slow down. Yi Yu grabbed his hand and called out, GM Li. Li Jinan stopped walking. At the corner of the street, he pressed her against the wall. For some reason, Yi Yu began to feel nervous. Li Jinan's dark eyes were like silver hooks that hooked her heart. Yi Yu looked at his violent eyes, and her heart raced. GM Li Jinan tilted his head slightly and leaned in closer, directly blocking the words she was about to say. Yi Yu was surprised. Although this wasn't the first time he had kissed her, she still felt an indescribable feeling in her heart. A sense of unease and incongruity was everywhere. There was something that was reminding her that she and Li Jinan weren't compatible. Yi Yu reached out and tried to move her head away, but Li Jinan held it tightly and pinned it firmly against the wall in the corner. Many people saw it, but they pretended not to see it. Li Jinan's kiss became deeper and deeper, more forceful and wilder. Yi Yu almost couldn't breathe. It was as if all the energy in her body had been sucked out. She struggled helplessly. After an indeterminate amount of time, Li Jinan finally released her. Where their lips met, a strand of silvery hair flowed out. It was seductive and seductive. Li Jinan pressed his body against hers and whispered, Let's do it. Dash. Chapter 1478. Perhaps it was because Li Jinan's words were too direct, but Yi Yu didn't react in time. Li Jinan closed in on her with narrowed eyes. He bent his knee slightly and hooked it between her legs. He rubbed it gently and slowly. Yi Yu had just seen the girl licking that thing. She felt uncomfortable all over. When she felt Li Jinan's movement, she shivered. Goosebumps broke out all over her body. She couldn't help but revel in it. Yi Yu's hand rested gently on Li Jinan's shoulder as she moaned softly. Li Jinan already knew the answer. He pulled her back to the hotel in no time. Yi Yu followed behind him without saying a word. Her heartbeat suddenly sped up. The faint, burning desire in her body was clearly affecting her, like a feather gently stirring and stirring. Li Jinan used the key card to open the door. He pulled her along and prepared to enter the room. Yi Yu retreated at the last minute. She retracted her hand and said, I think I better go back to my room to sleep. Li Jinan's eyes darkened. He pulled her over, wrapped her up, and carried her over his shoulder. He closed the door behind him and tossed her onto the bed. Yi Yu yelped. Before she could react, her body was firmly pinned down by him. She couldn't move at all. Li Jinan held her chin with one hand and wrapped his fiery lips around hers. He kissed her lightly and deeply. His other hand slowly moved down from her waist and quietly lifted the hem of her dress. Yu thought about it, but she also felt an inexplicable sense of guilt. She hadn't treated him as a boyfriend, but she had gone on a holiday with him in Hawaii. She hadn't treated him as her next boyfriend, but she had gone to bed with him a few times. What does this mean? Yu found a little strange. At the same time, it was a little exciting. The softness in front of her chest was gripped tightly. An indescribable sense of excitement spread through her entire body. Yu moaned and locked her legs around his. She passively endured the light, shallow, and deep kisses that he planted on her neck. A strange feeling spread from her tailbone. It was like fireworks exploding. It dispersed with a touch, but it was so seductive. Li Jinnan's breathing grew heavier. He couldn't wait to remove all of her clothes before he entered her. Yu hugged him tightly. The feeling of being filled was strange and wonderful. No wonder so many people like to do this kind of thing. It's really easy to get addicted. When Li Jinnan saw her expression, his movements quickened. In a hoarse voice, he asked, "Does it feel good?" Yu was immersed in the world that he had bestowed upon her. When she was caught off guard by his words, it incited the sinful excitement in her heart. Awesome. However, Yu was too embarrassed to open her mouth. She quietly tightened her grip and continued to passively accept and cater to him. When he didn't get an answer, he asked again, "You want it very much too, don't you?" Li Jinnan's calm face was tinged with intoxication. He whispered in a hoarse voice, "You look so beautiful like this." Yu felt a wave of embarrassment wash over her. She reached out and pushed his face away. With a reddened face, she said, "Stop talking." Li Jinnan smiled and lowered his head to kiss her on the lips. He continued kissing her and said, "This is even more beautiful." Huh? Yu was almost out of breath. Slow down. Chapter 1479. Be my girlfriend, Yu. It was a simple sentence, and it didn't sound very emotional. Li Jinnan's eyes were focused on her. His gaze was deep and calm, and it was tinged with a hint of heat. It was enough to move a person's heart. Yu was stunned. Her body suddenly shrank back. Her heartbeat hadn't changed much compared to before. However, there was an obvious throbbing in her heart that was rapidly spreading. It couldn't be stopped. Yu's actions made Li Jinnan suck in a breath of air. In a low voice, he said, "You're going to kill me." What did you just... Huh? What did you just say? Yu hugged him as she panted in disbelief. Li Jinnan knew that she was about to. At that moment, Li Jinnan stopped. In a low voice, he said, "I didn't hear you, huh?" Stopping at a critical moment, the feeling of not being able to move up or down was the most uncomfortable. Yu pushed him away and said, "Yeah?" Li Jinnan caressed her gently and slowly. He didn't come out or go in. Yu couldn't take it anymore and said, "Hurry up." "Hurry up for what?" Li Jinnan lowered his voice and paused. He leaned in close to her ear and said in a low voice, "Tell me." Yu's entire body was on fire. In a voice as low as a mosquito's buzz, she said, "Hurry up." "Move, huh?" "I didn't hear you." Li Jinnan leaned over her. His tongue gently tickled the tip of her ear. In a low voice, he said, "Speak louder so that I can respond." His low, hoarse voice was gentle and seductive. Yu felt as if she had been drugged. Her entire body felt uncomfortable. She hugged his back tightly and squirmed uncomfortably. She said, "Hurry up. Otherwise, I won't be your girlfriend anymore." Such a light tone and soft threat made Li Jinnan chuckle out loud. He moved his body and gently embraced her. He said, "You said it yourself. In the future, if you want anything, you can tell your boyfriend. I'll settle it for you." Li Jinnan pushed against her forcefully. With a grunt, he continued hoarsely by her ear and said, "Any request." The scorching breath brushed past his ears and turned into layers of numbness that assaulted him. Yu was exhausted. Her body swayed with his movements. The score of the song was indescribable. It was a moving movement. When she woke up the next day, Li Jinnan was no longer by her side. The cruel marks on their bodies proved how crazy they had been last night. Yu touched the blanket beside her. It was still warm. Suddenly, there was a light knock on the bathroom door, and Li Jinan walked in bare-chested. He was only wearing a pair of black casual shorts. His face was glowing, and he was in high spirits. He smiled and said, "Morning." Yi Yu looked at Li Jinan in a daze. She seemed to have done something incredible. Were they together now? This realization was a little sudden. She looked at him and asked, "When are you coming back to China? It's up to you." Li Jinan lit a cigarette, took a drag, and exhaled a long smoke ring. "I'm fine with anything." Li Xiqing was in charge of the company. He wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to squeeze as much as he could to get his revenge for those 4 years. Yi Yu thought for a moment and said, "I want to go back." Chapter 1480. I want to go back and visit my grandfather. It had been many, many years since she had gone back. Ever since she had followed Yi Tian to the capital, she had never seen her grandfather again. Her grandfather had 7 or 8 grandsons and many grandsons. For some reason, her grandfather had always favored her. Whether it was food or fun, her grandfather would always be the first to think of giving it to Yi Yu. When she was young, her grandfather would always smile at her and say, "You, when you grow up, I'll take you to the town to watch a show. It's going to be great." Yi Yu remembered those words to this very day. However, before she could grow up, Yi Tian divorced her biological father. Yi Tian took her away from the Yi village and married a wealthy businessman in the capital. From then on, she lived the life of a rich wife. Everyone was envious of Yi Tian's wealthy lifestyle. Everyone knew that Guan Kui had a wonderful stepmother. However, no one knew that Guan Kui's stepmother had cherished her current life because she had been poor in the past. In the blink of an eye, more than a decade had passed. Yi Tian had never thought of bringing Yi Yu back to see her family. She had heard that her grandfather had passed away a long time ago, and her grandmother hadn't been well in the past 2 years. Yi Yu had always wanted to visit them, but she hadn't had the chance. In the past, Yi Yu had been ambitious and wanted everything. Career, love, family. She had held on to them all. In the end, she had lost all of them. Now, all Yi Yu wanted was peace and quiet for a while. Yi Yu took a deep breath and gathered her thoughts. She looked at Li Jinan and asked, "What about you? Are you going back?" Li Jinan was shirtless as he sat on the edge of the bed. His tan skin showed obvious scratches from a woman. There were also shallow hickeys on her neck. It was very embarrassing to look at. Yi Yu turned her head away in embarrassment. When Li Jinan saw that, he chuckled. He flicked the ash off his cigarette and said, "Of course. I'll go with you to visit your grandfather." Yi Yu was quiet for a moment. She had expected that and said, "I don't think it's appropriate. Old people are getting on in years. They want to see their children and grandchildren settle down. Your grandfather will be happier if you bring a boyfriend home." Li Jinan looked at her and raised his eyebrows. "Does your family know about your divorce?" Yi Yu was stunned for a moment before she finally reacted. She hadn't thought about this before, so she frowned slightly when she heard this. She really hadn't thought about this problem. Grandpa definitely knew that she was married. If she went back this time and told him that she was divorced, the old man would definitely be worried. "It doesn't matter. As long as you don't go, they won't know that I'm divorced." Yi Yu made up her mind and said, "GM Li, I think we can give each other some privacy. I would like to go back to my hometown on my own." When Li Jinan heard that, he frowned deeply. She actually asked for privacy? Could it be that he was chasing too closely? Li Jinan gave it some serious thought. From Kingstown to the capital, then from the capital to Kingstown, and then to Hawaii. It didn't seem like there was much personal space. "Presently, I am unemployed. You have a company, and your company needs you. After we return to Kingstown, you should go back to work. When are you coming to find me?" Does this mean that he has agreed to it? Yi Yu immediately replied, "Wait for me to finish visiting grandfather. Dash." Chapter 1481. When I'm done visiting my grandfather, Li Jinan mulled over the words carefully. After confirming that there weren't any traps, he nodded his head and said, "Sure." Yi Yu suddenly felt as if she had been released from prison. It was an inexplicable feeling, but it quickly turned to joy. Her face relaxed. Li Jinan saw the change in her expression and stood up. He leaned over and asked, "Why do I feel like there's a trap?" "No. How could there be?" You thought about it carefully. "There really isn't." "Oh." Li Jinan nodded his head meaningfully. "In that case, you're just saying that you're done with me and want to get rid of me?" "Done with me?" Yi Yu's face turned red. She glared at him and retorted, I didn't ask you to. Didn't you?" Li Jinan leaned closer and whispered, "Ask yourself honestly." He placed his hand over her heart and asked, "Didn't you?" Yi Yu's face turned red from being pressed down. Last night was one thing, but it was broad daylight now. She immediately denied it and said no. Li Jinan raised his eyebrows and lifted her chin. He lowered his head and kissed her. His kissing skills were getting better and better. He easily aroused the desire in the depths of her body. Yi Yu raised her hands to hug him and slowly catered to him. The feeling of being addicted to drugs made Yi Yu feel both uncomfortable and enjoyable at the same time. She couldn't help but be intoxicated. An indescribable sense of pleasure spread from the depths of her body to the tip of her heart. It was difficult to ignore. Li Jinan's body tensed up. Just as Yi Yu's emotions were stirred, he released her. Yi Yu's eyes were lost. She looked at him with desire in them. Li Jinan stroked his chin and asked, "Do you want it?" Yi Yu was stunned for a moment before she realized that he was taking revenge for what he had just said. Annoyed, Yi Yu extended her leg and kicked him away. "I don't want to. Get lost." Li Jinan laughed out loud. With a flip of his body, he burrowed under the covers and hugged her. "But I want to." After packing up, they headed straight to the airport. When they arrived in Kingstown, it was still daytime. The sun was blazing in the afternoon. It was the perfect time for an afternoon nap. Li Jinan took Yi Yu back to her apartment and returned to the old manor. Yi Yu went back to visit her grandfather. Li Jinan wanted to see his grandfather too. Old Master Li Sun's health was deteriorating day by day. Every day, he watched his children and grandchildren running around. His smiling face made him look older and older. Every time they met, the wrinkles on his face would deepen a little. Li Jinan snuffed out the cigarette and pressed the doorbell. Lu Sa opened the door. When she saw that it was Li Jinan, her face lit up with joy. She said, "The old man was just talking about you, and you're back. Come on in." Lu Sa took the luggage from Li Jinan's hands and said, "Recently, old Captain has been taking Chinese medicine. I've been brewing this medicine for half a day now, but old Captain refuses to drink it no matter what. Go and persuade him." "All right. The medicine is heating up in the kitchen. Go and get it." Li Jinan obeyed and quickly went to his grandfather's room with the medicine. However, Captain Li Sun wasn't in the room. Li Jinan took a detour and went to the study. There was no sign of him in the study either. In the end, Li Jinan found him in the courtyard. When he heard the commotion behind him, old Captain Li Sun turned his head. When he saw Li Jinan, his eyes turned into crescents. His aged voice was gentle as he said, "You're back." Chapter 1482. But humans couldn't escape the fate of old age, sickness, and death. All the glory of youth would fade with the passage of time, until the day of old age, when it would become a majestic presence that would influence those who came after it. Perhaps this was the greatest achievement of the old man's life. Li Jinan's heart ached. He stepped forward and called out, "Grandfather." The wrinkles on the old man's face were layered. They were even deeper than the last time Li Jinan had seen him. Li Jinan held the bowl in his hand. The brown liquid was steaming. When old Captain Li saw the medicine, the smile on his face weakened. He asked, "Jinan, did you come back to feed this medicine to your grandfather?" Li Jinan laughed and replied, "Of course not. But you'd better drink this medicine quickly. It's good for your health." When the old man heard that, he became unhappy and said, "I'm not drinking it. I know my grandfather's condition very well." "Humph. Grandfather, if you drink it, I'll tell you a secret," Li Jinan said. "Huh?" Old Captain Li's cloudy eyes lit up. He looked at Li Jinan and asked, "A secret?" "Yes. It's a secret that I haven't told anyone." Li Jinan pretended to be mysterious as he held the bowl in front of him. I believe that you will be very interested in this secret, grandfather. TSK. A secret that would interest me? Old Captain Li said disdainfully. Very quickly, his eyes lit up as he asked, could it be that you found someone? Li Jinan raised his eyebrows slightly and handed the bowl over. Old Captain Li glared at him and cursed under his breath. What an unfilial descendant. Although that was what he said, he obediently reached out with both hands and took the bowl. He frowned as he finished the medicine. He whimpered as he showed the bottom of the bowl to Li Jinan. After confirming that there were only dregs left, he wiped his mouth and said, hurry up and tell me. What secret? Li Jinan took the bowl and put it aside. He replied, I've found someone. When old Captain Li heard that, he was stunned for a moment before bursting into laughter. With a wave of his withered hand, he patted Li Jinan on the shoulder and said, you're a good lad. You're really something. Does that mean that you'll be able to get married after your older brother's wedding is held? Li Jinan didn't dare to say. He didn't think it would be that soon. However, Li Beixing's wedding was in December this year, and there were still several months to go. By that time, he might have already gotten Yi Yu. Li Jinan thought about it and replied, I'll try my best. Good. Grandfather Li Sun was overjoyed. You're my grandson indeed. You're so promising. What kind of girl is she? Li Jinan looked into Captain Li's cloudy eyes, but his gaze was bright. He held his grandfather's withered hand and said, she's a good girl. Nonsense. If she wasn't a good girl, would you want her? Not everyone can be accepted into the Li clan. Elder Li Sun was very serious. You can't have a loose woman, and you can't have a bad character either. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor when it comes to finding a partner. It doesn't matter if she's pretty or ugly, as long as you like her. That was exactly what Li Jinan was thinking. His eyes turned into crescents as he asked, then, Grandpa, if I were to get a divorce and marry an unmarried woman, do you think that's reasonable? You can't get a divorce. Li Sun's tone was very firm. If you can't get along, you might as well not get married. Isn't that wasting the girl's youth? Chapter 1483. Li Jinan cleared his throat and asked, what if I don't think she's suitable for me and end up divorcing her? Do you think it's reasonable for me to marry someone else who hasn't been married before? Captain Li Sun felt that something was amiss. He narrowed his eyes and looked at him. Li Jinan changed the topic and said, it's like this. I have a friend who has fallen in love with a divorced woman. She's afraid that her family won't approve of it, so she doesn't dare to tell them. That's why she asked me to check in with her family. If you think it's fine, then it should be fine on her side as well. Li Jinan continued, although I don't think it's very reliable, our family is very open-minded. Our way of thinking is different from those old fogies, especially my grandfather. His thinking has always been trendy. When he heard that, Captain Li Sun finally nodded his head. Having been flattered, he pouted and said, of course, our family is the most open-minded. Look at the marriage I arranged for your second brother. Look at how great it was. Also, when your eldest brother asked for a wife, did I say anything? Young people these days only care about what they like. They want to spend the rest of their lives with themselves, not with their family. Happiness is the most important thing. Li Jinan agreed wholeheartedly. He nodded his head again and said, every word that grandfather says is golden. Of course. However, your friend had better not misjudge her. Character is the most important thing. Yeah, you're right, grandfather. Li Jinan echoed earnestly. Captain Li waved his hand. His expression was one of pride, but modesty as he said, that's enough. Stop sucking up to me. Tell me, who is your friend? Grandfather, actually, that person is me. When Li Jinan said that, he didn't forget to take a step back. He cleared his throat and said, I've fallen in love with a divorced woman. When Captain Li heard that, his face fell. Li Jinan quickly waved his hands and said, let me explain first. She's actually a very good lady. Captain Li suddenly felt unwell. He looked at Li Jinan with a pained expression. His body trembled as he said, "Ew. Grandfather, you were the one who said that happiness is the most important thing." Li Jinan didn't dare to hide and quickly went forward to support him. Captain Li was exasperated. He reached out and slapped Li Jinan twice and said, "Third brother, how dare you set your grandfather up? You must be tired of living." Li Jinan took a few slaps, but didn't make a sound. He stood up steadily without support. "How you are? And you called yourself a friend? A friend? A friend?" The old man slapped him a few more times and was soon out of breath. Why are the children of the Li family getting more and more cunning? Li Jinan couldn't help but smile, but it was such a small movement that Captain Li saw it clearly. With a harumph, Captain Li flung Li Jinan's hand away and asked, "What family is the other party from?" Cough. "She has an older sister. Her parents are divorced, and her marriage with her previous husband was just a marriage of convenience. Li of Li, Li uncle." Li Jinan said. Li said. Jinan, Li Ti He Li. Li Jinan with a with. He, Li Ti Ti say so. Li Jinha he upin. Li. Chapter 1484. How did you know that? Li Jinan asked. Old Captain Li looked as if he had expected it, and said, "They show it on TV every day. Something about a 3-minute painless abortion or an 8-minute hymen repair." Li Jinan coughed and said, "Don't watch so many useless commercials on TV. Not only are they misleading people, but they're also misleading Grandpa." Old Captain Li said, "In any case, I don't believe that a married woman hasn't done anything. Do you think your grandfather has dementia?" "That's not it, Grandpa. I've already said that it's a marriage of convenience," Li Jinan said. "Actually, that man has problems in that area. He's just marrying a wife for show." Old Captain Li looked surprised. Really? When Li Jinan saw that, he knew that Old Captain Li was at least half convinced. He looked at Old Captain Li seriously and nodded his head. Really? As for whether or not Shen Luo and really had problems in that area, that was none of his business. Old Captain Li immediately put on a sympathetic expression and said, "That's pretty tragic. Most importantly, Grandpa, you taught me from a young age to be a responsible man. She gave her first time to me, so I have to be responsible for her," Li Jinan said with a serious expression. "How do you know if it's true or not?" Old Captain Li was in disbelief. "How did you just happen to bump into it? Furthermore, you knew that she was divorced, yet you still went to mess with her. Aren't you being a hooligan?" Li Jinan was slapped a few more times, but he didn't dodge. In a muffled voice, he said, "I didn't know that she was married at that time. You can mess around just because you didn't know? Io, you rascal. Ahem. I knew her at that time, so it wasn't considered messing around." Old Captain Li was speechless. He sighed and said, "Just don't be fooled. As long as you're happy, the children will have their own happiness. I'm not going to bother with you anymore." "Thank you, Grandpa." Li Jinan held the old man's hand and smiled obediently. Old Captain Li harumphed and said, "Let's go. Accompany me for a walk by the lake." "Sure. Don't be happy too early." "I don't care, but do you think your mother will allow a married woman to marry into the family?" Old Captain Li's tone was earnest as he said, "And your father's side, your 2 older brothers." As he spoke, his temper flared up. He pinched Li Jinan's hand and continued, "In the past, I was afraid that your second brother wouldn't be able to rein in his infatuation, so I got him a wife. In the end, I managed to guard against your second brother. You're even more unconventional than your second brother, to actually get yourself a wife like this." "What do you mean by that?" "It's not illegal to be divorced. Besides, the girl is nice and good-looking. Most importantly, the relationship between them was very harmonious. It'll only count when you bring him back to take a look." As the old man walked, he said, "Grandpa doesn't have much time left. Right now, my greatest wish is to give your child a name before I die. That way, your entire generation will be named by me." As he spoke, Old Master Li grinned from ear to ear and said, "I've already decided on the name of the child in Qianqian's womb. He'll be called Li Moyun. It could be a boy or a girl. What do you think?" "Moyun? That's right. That child, Mosin, still thinks that we're not his family. Let Qianqian's child have Imo in his name so that he'll have a sense of belonging." Old Captain Li gazed into the distance. Under the blazing sun, the wind rustled the grass. We can't let old Tang go extinct. Dash. Chapter 1485. Yi Village was located in Yin Town, Ji Province, in the south. It was about a 3-hour drive from Kingstown. Yi rested at home for a day. The next morning, she set off for the train station. After buying the ticket, Yi slept the entire way. When she was young, her grandfather lived in a huge yard. There were chickens, ducks, dogs, and cats. Every time she entered, there would be a huge commotion. Moreover, there would be all kinds of poultry feces on the ground. It would stink the moment she entered. She hadn't been back for many years. Yintown had changed a lot. Following her memory, Yi found the old locust tree. This tree was hundreds of years old. Many people would pray there in the past. It was said to be an offering to the gods. Beyond the old locust tree was the second house in the third alley. Yi carried a big bag and wore a t-shirt, jeans, and sneakers. She walked into the alley and saw a stainless steel security door. This place had been renovated and turned into a villa. The huge yard of the past was nowhere to be seen. There were no chickens, ducks, dogs, or cats. Yi wondered if she had come to the wrong place. She stood at the door for a while. Just as she was hesitating about whether to call Yi Qianqian to ask, someone suddenly opened the door. It was a man with tan skin. He looked to be in his 50s or 60s. His hair was short, and he looked clean and energetic. He was wearing a short-sleeved striped shirt. His face was neatly combed. When he saw Yi, he was stunned. He seemed to be in a trance as he called out, "Qianqian?" However, after taking a closer look, he realized that she didn't look like Yi Qianqian. Yi Jinhua found it hard to believe. "Are you Yi?" He spoke in a local dialect. Yi hadn't heard it for many years. Even when he spoke to Yi Qianqian, he spoke in Mandarin. Yi was caught off guard. She suddenly recalled the times when her father carried her on his shoulders and ran around. He would always call her Yi, good girl, and Yi, beautiful girl. Yi understood what he meant, but the man in front of her was a complete stranger. She wanted to reply in the dialect, but she couldn't. She didn't know how to speak it. Yi Jinhua looked at her and asked in Mandarin, "Are you Yi?" Yi Jinhua was used to speaking in the local dialect. His Mandarin had a strong local accent. Yi smiled and replied, "Yeah, I'm Yi. I'm back." Hearing this, Yi Jinhua also laughed. Her eyes curved as if she was touched. She looked around and asked, "Who did you come with?" "I'm alone." Yi looked at him. Her eyes were watery. "I'm living with my sister now. I don't have much contact with my mother." Yi Jinhua's eyes were slightly disappointed. Only then did he react and said, Come in and have a seat." Yi nodded her head and walked in. She was greeted by a beautifully tidied courtyard. In the yard, there were flowers and plants, looking very elegant and beautiful. When Yi saw it, she was stunned. There were roses, Chinese roses, jasmine, all of them were flowers that Yi Tian liked. In the villa in the imperial capital, there were also these kinds of plants, but they were placed more elegantly and delicately. The flowers were in full bloom, and one could see that they had been carefully cared for. Yi Jinhua saw her gaze, smiled, and said, "I had nothing to do, so I planted some for fun." Chapter 1486. After all these years, he had never forgotten Yi Tian's hobby. Yi walked in and looked around. She realized that the decorations were very elegant and exquisite. In this small town, it was especially stylish. After looking around, she didn't see the old man anywhere. She had a bad feeling about this. She looked at Yi Jinhua and asked, "Where's grandfather?" Yi Jinhua saw the expression on his face and felt a little reproachful. It was as if she had done something wrong when she was young. He said, "Grandpa is inside. Grandpa doesn't know how to speak Mandarin. Do you know how to speak our hometown dialect?" Yi thought for a moment and asked, "Grandpa." Yi Jinhua could not help but laugh. "Grandpa is inside. Quickly go in." Yi's heart warmed. She walked into the living room, but her grandfather was nowhere to be seen. In her memory, the old man who always supported her with a smile would slightly bend his back, pull her up, and lead her everywhere. As soon as she walked into the old man's room, She couldn't help but feel her eyes sting. She almost burst into tears. The old man in the room had a head full of white hair and a haggard face. He wore a gray Chinese tunic suit and looked much older than before. When he saw Yi Yu, he called out, "Qian is back." Yi Yu's eyes were burning. She walked over to the old man and said, "Grandpa." Other than calling him Grandpa, she couldn't say anything else. It had been too long since she last came back. It had been so long that she had even forgotten about Fong Yen. It suddenly dawned on Yi Yu that she realized that living in the capital for so many years hadn't made her happy. The happiness she once thought was crumbling bit by bit. In the end, it was not as warm as the old man at home. The old woman reached out to hold Yi Yu's hand with her withered hand and remarked, "Qian is getting prettier and prettier. Did you bring a boyfriend home?" Yi Yu shook her head and replied, "No." These two simple words were written in a dialect. Other than a few simple words, she couldn't think of anything else. She could only call out, "Dad." Hearing this, Yi Jinhua walked in from outside and asked, "What's wrong?" "I'm not Qian. Please tell Grandpa that I can't speak anymore." Yi Jinhua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He quickly began to translate. The old man's eyesight was a little blurry, and he was also slightly demented. When he heard Yi Jinhua's words, he only gave a slight response. Then he said, Yi Jinhua said helplessly, "In the past 2 years, his mental state hasn't been good. The doctor said that he has dementia and he needs to be watched at all times. So I haven't been working for the past few years and stayed at home to take care of him. Luckily, I had some savings when I was young, so I could live comfortably without working. See, I renovated the house. Is it nice?" Yi Yu looked around. The decor was very elegant. It was very stylish in every way. However, this was also the style that Yi Tian liked. Light retro, nostalgic style. He could see Yi Tian's shadow clearly no matter where he looked. Her hobbies and taste had seeped into this strange yet familiar home. She had abandoned a man who loved her so much and married a rich businessman who only knew how to be busy all day long. How sad it was for her to live such a luxurious life. Yi Yu pursed her lips and replied, "It's pretty." Chapter 1487. Most of the old man's teeth had fallen out. The food that Grandpa ate couldn't be too hard. Yi Jinhua made some fragrant porridge and asked Yi Yu to feed him. After that, he went out. Yi Yu sat on a chair and fed Grandpa. She was careful. Grandpa ate obediently. His toothless mouth opened and closed as he looked at Yi Yu with a smile. Yi Yu's heart ached, but at the same time, she felt a sense of warmth. When she was young, the old man would hold her hand and walk around with a bowl in his hand as he fed her. The love and pampering in his eyes seemed to be yesterday. Yi Yu scooped up a spoon and waited for the old man to eat, but he didn't move. As he looked at Yi Yu, his cloudy eyes suddenly lit up. Yi Yu didn't move. She looked at him and said, "Grandpa, eat." The old man acted as if he hadn't heard her. His eyes stared straight at her. Suddenly, he said, "Yu is back." Those words made Yi Yu's eyes sting. She immediately teared up. She nodded her head and said, "Yes, Yu is back." The old man opened his mouth and sucked on the spoon. He closed his mouth and began to chew on the porridge. His expression was no different from before. It was as if he hadn't said anything. Yi Yu's throat was choked. Tears welled up in her eyes. Yi Yu stayed there for the rest of the day. She brought along a change of clothes and took care of the old man for 2 days. Grandpa seemed to recognize Yi Yu. Every time he saw her, his eyes would curve into a smile. Yi Yu was very happy. The three of them sat at the same table and ate. Suddenly, the old man raised his head and asked, "Is Yu married?" He spoke in a dialect, and his voice was muffled. Yi Yu didn't react for a moment, but Yi Jinhua understood. He suddenly remembered and asked, Yu, are you married?" She had stayed there for 2 days, but none of them had brought it up. She hadn't expected Grandpa to know about it. Yi Yu was stunned for a moment and immediately replied, "I'm divorced." Yi Jinhua was obviously shocked. Divorced? Why would they get divorced for no reason? Is there anything that a husband and wife can't discuss? Why? Before she could finish her sentence, Yi Yu's cell phone rang. Yi Yu fell as if she had been pardoned. She immediately picked up her phone and said, "I'll take a call." The caller was Li Jinan. She picked up the phone and greeted him. "I'm at the door." Li Jinan's voice rang out, causing Yi Yu to choke on her words. "What?" Yi Yu couldn't believe it. "Which entrance?" "Yin Town, Big Locust Tree, Third Alley, Second Door," Li Jinan said in a calm voice. He was simply narrating. The words that came out of his mouth struck Yi Yu like a bolt of lightning. She found it hard to believe. "What?" Yi Yu stood up and immediately headed out. He opened the security door, and sure enough, he saw a tall and straight figure. He hung up the phone and asked, "Aren't you going to invite me in for a chat?" Yi Qianqian asked. Yi Yu found it incredulous and asked, "How did you know about this place?" As soon as he asked the question, he immediately realized that it had to be Yi Qianqian. Li Jinan didn't reply. He walked around her and walked in. When he saw Yi Jinhua walking out, he greeted politely, "Hello, Dad." Third Young Master 666. Chapter 1488. When Yi Yu heard that, she felt as if she had been struck by lightning. "Dad?" Li Jinan called him. "Dad?" Yi Yu was stunned for a moment. She immediately went forward and pulled Li Jinan back. She exclaimed, "Are you crazy? Who are you calling Dad?" Li Jinan glanced at her and replied, "I'm calling you Dad. Isn't this your father?" "Yes, that's right." Li Jinan smiled and said, "As long as you didn't get it wrong." Yi Yu tugged at him and asked, "Is that the point? Why are you calling my dad Dad?" I didn't call him Dad. I just called him Dad." "You heard wrong," Li Jinan explained with a straight face. Yi Yu was furious. She pulled him to the side and asked in a small voice, "Why are you here?" "I came to look for you," Li Jinan replied in amusement. "I also wanted to meet your parents." "Here." His hands were filled with health supplements. In addition to supplements, there were also various medications for Alzheimer's. One look at the packaging, and you could tell that they were expensive. Yi Yu looked at the pile of things. Her face turned bitter. What's wrong?" Li Jinan pretended not to understand. Just as Yi Yu was about to speak, he looked at Yi Jinhua and said, "I brought some things for you. You can take a look and see if there's anything you can use." Yi Jinhua looked at the young man in front of him. His eyes shone with admiration as he said, "You're Yuyu's. I'm your boyfriend for now." Li Jinan didn't stand on ceremony as he introduced himself. "But we can get married anytime." Yi Jinhua nodded his head and said, all right. Come in and take a seat. Have you eaten?" "Not yet." Li Jinan didn't stand on ceremony. He followed Yi Jinhua in and said, "I've been driving for more than 2 hours. I'm a little hungry." One open-minded young man. Yi Jinhua was so pleased that he couldn't stop smiling. He said, Yu, hurry up and get your boyfriend a bowl and chopsticks." As he spoke, he took the things from Li Jinan's hands and said, "It's fine as long as he's here. Why are you being so polite?" Li Jinan smiled. "It's what I should do." He looked at Yi Yu and said, "Thank you." She turned around and reluctantly went to the kitchen to wash her hands. She scooped some rice for Li Jinan. Yi Jinhua picked up a pair of chopsticks and picked up some food for Li Jinan. He said, "The food at home is a little more casual, and there's not much to entertain. Just make do with what you have." Li Jinan glanced at it and remarked, "That's a sumptuous feast. It looks delicious." She picked up her chopsticks and picked up a piece of crispy fried meat that Yi Jinhua had just picked up. "It looks, smells, and tastes great. It's delicious." Yi Jinhua smiled happily and said, "It's good that you like it. It's good that you like it. Yu's cooking skills are better than mine. Fortunately, I'm not the one cooking today." Li Jinan was a little surprised and asked, "You did this? Aren't you only good at the bottom?" Yi Yu looked at him with disdain and asked, "Who said that?" When she was with the Shun family, old Mrs. Shun made her do everything. Cooking and cleaning had to be done well. If any of them fell behind, wouldn't he be scolded half to death? Li Jinan nodded his head and said, "In that case, there's no need to hire a housekeeper in the future. You'll be better served than Lu Saw." "Who's Lu Saw?" Yi Jinhua asked. "She's my aunt. She's been with us for many years." Yi Jinhua nodded his head. Young man, what's your name? Li Jinan, Yi Yu replied. Chapter 1489. Speaking of my father, you probably don't know him. My father's name is Li Xiao, and my grandfather is Li Sun. Hearing that, Yi Jinhua's eyes immediately lit up. He clapped his hands and said, Commander Li Sun's grandson? When Li Jinan heard that, he nodded his head. Yes. Yi Jinhua suddenly became excited and said, So you are Commander Li's grandson. You've grown so big in the blink of an eye. Yi Yu clicked her tongue and asked, Daddy, how did you know? When I was young, I stayed in Connecticut for a period of time. At that time, the city was not peaceful. If it weren't for the commander, I'm afraid I would have died. Yi Jinhua was very emotional. This is fate. Xiaonan, how did you get to know our Yu Yu? She works in my company, so of course we know each other. Li Jinnan's words were very concise. Yi Jinhua was taken aback and asked, Didn't you join the army? Yes, but I got injured and retired. Yi Jinhua felt a little regretful and said, Were you hurt? Is it serious? It's not serious. I just hurt the ligaments in my leg. I'll be fine as long as I don't exercise intensely for long periods of time. I've been resting for 4 to 5 years, so I'm fine now. When Yi Yu heard his words, she instinctively glanced at his legs. This was the first time she had heard him mention his injury. Before he had brought it up, she hadn't noticed it at all. Yi Jinhua chatted with Li Jinan for a while. When she saw that Li Jinan was full, she chased them to the sofa. While cleaning up the dishes, she listened to their conversation. Yi Jinhua's eyes and heart were filled with endless admiration for old Master Li Sun, from the gossip of his family to the various graces of old Master Li Sun. In fact, Li Jinan didn't know everything about his grandfather. When he heard him talk about it, it was the first time that he had such an image and understanding of his grandfather when he was young. After Yi Yu finished washing the dishes, she realized that they were still talking, so she took Grandpa out for a walk. By the time Yi Yu returned, the sky was already dark. Yi Jinhua was sitting in the yard smoking. When he saw Yi Yu return, he stood up and took his father from her. He said, Go and keep your boyfriend company. He looks a little tired, so I let him rest. Yi Yu was taken aback and asked, Where did you send him to rest? Your room. The liquefied gas in the town is unstable. Go and see if you can turn on the hot water, Yi Jinhua said as he helped his father to the room. The composure on Yi Yu's face cracked as she asked, Dad, how could you let a man into my room so casually? Yi Jinhua was a little baffled. He turned around and said, Haven't you been with him for a long time? What's there to be shy about? Besides, he's Commander Li Sun's grandson. He's reliable. Yi Yu was speechless. Just because he was Li Sun's grandson, he sold his own daughter. Yi Yu suddenly doubted her own position. Although she hadn't been back for so many years, it wasn't as if she couldn't even compare to Li Jinan. What the hell? Panting with rage, he walked to the room and opened the door. It was pitch black inside. She reached out to turn on the light. With a glance, she saw Li Jinan leaning against the side of the bed. His eyes were closed, and his breathing was even. He looked like he was asleep, but the bed was still there, and it didn't look like it had been touched at all. When Yi Yu saw it, her unhappiness dissipated a little. Chapter 1490. Li Jinan was shaken twice, but he had no intention of opening his eyes. Yi Yu lifted his hand and gestured. The corners of Li Jinnan's lips curled up slightly. With a flick of his arm, he pulled her into his embrace. Yi Yu hadn't expected Li Jinan to make such a move. She was caught off guard, and she was in his arms. Li Jinan held her as they lay down and said, Lie down. Yi Yu's face burned. She reached out and pushed him away. Didn't I ask you to lie down with me in your arms? With that, she struggled even harder to push him away. Li Jinnan's strength wasn't something she could shake. She couldn't move him at all. His head rested on her shoulder as he slowly opened his eyes. His dark pupils were shockingly bright in the dim light. In a husky voice, he whispered, Then should I lie on top of you? Yi Qianqian looked at him and asked, I'll lie on top of you? Yi Yu's heart raced. She didn't know whether it was because she had received a shock or something. Li Jinan leaned his head in and shifted his body slightly. Straightening himself, he said, "It's pretty comfortable." Yu was about to say something, but before she could say anything, she felt a wave of darkness looming over her. Li Jinan's lips were captured. His actions were gentle and slow as he sucked lightly. Yu's heart raced. Li Jinan's hand gently caressed her waist. His rough palm caressed her. Yu's body trembled slightly, and her breathing quickened. She reached out and pushed his shoulder away. Turning her head away, she whispered, "This is my father's house." "I know." Li Jinan panted slightly as he leaned over to look at her. "So? Not here," Yu whispered, a little embarrassed. "There are elders at home." Li Jinan smiled and kissed her on the lips. "Did you think I came looking for you just to sleep with you?" Although that was part of the reason, it wasn't the entire reason. Yu suddenly felt embarrassed. She struggled and said, "If that's not the case, then let go." Li Jinan's smile deepened as he asked, "Do you want to sleep with me?" "No. Let go. It's fine even if you want to. I don't mind." Yu's embarrassment turned to anger. She struggled for a moment and asked, "Are you going to let me go or not?" "Okay. Let go." He let go, and she immediately got up. Li Jinan turned around and lay on the bed. Looking at her flushed face, he was in a good mood and said, "Come on. I'm ready." Yu laughed. She picked up the pillow beside her and threw it at Li Jinan's head. "I'll sleep with you, my foot." Li Jinan's head was under the pillow. His laughter was muffled, but it was hearty. He said, "I'm fine with sleeping on my head. I don't mind." Yu was speechless. "I can't continue this conversation." She turned around, found her pajamas, walked into the bathroom, and stomped angrily to take a shower. Because of Li Xiqing's revenge, Li Jinan had a lot of documents to deal with. He had been busy all night and was really tired today. However, he hadn't brought any clothes with him. He stood up and took off his coat. He sat on the edge of the bed and waited for Yu to come out. Yu was wearing a white negligee. When she came out, Li Jinan's eyes widened. When she saw his gaze, Yu felt a little awkward. "I only have one set of pajamas. I didn't plan to stay long." Chapter 1491. Li Jinan was bare-chested, revealing his well-defined muscles. His tan skin made him look very healthy. When Yu saw him walking over, alarm bells went off in her head. She took a step back and asked, "What are you doing?" Li Jinan walked over and stopped in front of her. His lips curled up slightly as he lowered his head to look at her. Yu felt a little uncomfortable. Her body tensed up as she leaned back. Her heart was pounding as she looked at him. Li Jinan looked at her expression and said softly, "I'm going to take a shower." With that, he walked around her and headed into the bathroom. Yu suddenly felt a little silly. Her face began to burn. Annoyed, she turned to glare at Li Jinan and stomped her foot. "Why do you have to get so close to me for no reason? You made me think so much, sob. This is too awkward." With that glare, Li Jinan happened to turn his head. Li Jinan could see the expression on her face. Li Jinan chuckled and said, "Help me wash my clothes." With that, he turned around and closed the bathroom door. Yu was even more annoyed. She angrily went back to the bed. When she saw the clothes that Li Jinan had left on the chair, she picked them up and sniffed them. It smelled good. Despite the scorching summer sun, there wasn't much of a smell. "I don't need to wash them at all. They aren't dirty. In any case, I'm leaving tomorrow." Yu tossed the shirt back and ignored him. When Li Jinan walked out, Yu was sitting on the bed playing with her phone. Her clothes were still there. He strode forward, took off his shoes, and got onto the bed naturally. Yu only glanced at him and didn't mind. She lowered her head and continued. In any case, she had already done what she should and shouldn't have done several times. Li Jinan felt a little defeated. He leaned over and asked, "What are you looking at?" Yu ignored him. She looked down at her Weibo and laughed. Li Jinan leaned over her arm and asked, "What are you laughing at?" Yu was a little startled by his intimate action. She took a step back. Li Jinan didn't seem to realize that his action was inappropriate. He leaned over and said, "Let me look too." He was bare-chested, revealing the distinct lines on his body. The muscles on his arms, abdomen, and back were all very robust. In this way, his weight would naturally not be low. Yu felt a weight on her leg. His entire body was on top of it. He craned his neck to look at her cell phone. With one glance, he saw the page on her phone. The title was striking. How does it feel to have a boyfriend with a good figure? Li Jinan's first reaction was to look at himself. It seemed not bad. Yu immediately raised the phone and said, "It's so heavy. Get lost." He pulled her hand down and said, "Your boyfriend has a great figure. Aren't you talking about me? Let me see." Yu immediately shifted the phone away. She raised her hand and said, "You're invading my privacy." "Oh." Li Jinan retracted his hand. He looked at her meaningfully and said, "So, you do such things in secret." Her first reaction was to ask, "What did I do?" "You're plotting against me." Li Jinan seemed a little emotional and angry. He lay on her lap and said, "I never expected you to be such a person." Chapter 1492. Did I? Li Jinan smiled and reached out to take her phone. Let me see. Let me see. Get up. Give it to me, and I'll get up." Yu was exasperated and handed the phone over. Li Jinan stood up and took it. There were a few pictures on it. He read them aloud. 1. Don't want him to wear clothes. Want to strip him naked at any time. Yeah. So, you're that kind of person. Yu was embarrassed by his reading. She reached out to snatch the phone back. "Give it back to me." Li Jinan dodged, and Yu's hand touched his chest. Yu realized it and immediately retracted her hand as if she had been electrocuted. However, he reached out and held her hand in place. Li Jinan held her hand and continued reading. 2. Get wet at the sight of him. Want to F***ck him. Yu's face turned even redder. She said, "It was just a random swipe. It wasn't me." TSK. Li Jinan held the phone in his hand and looked at her in disgust. So, women are like that too, thirsty? He had thought that women were shy and bashful. The women on Weibo were too open. Yu felt too ashamed to show her face. Her hand was placed on his left chest. His heartbeat could be clearly heard on her palm. It was steady and rhythmic. Even when he spoke, his chest vibrated slightly. She could clearly feel it. Yu was embarrassed. "Why did you read out? I'm used to reading things out loud." Li Jinan looked at her with a mischievous look in his eyes and said, "It'll feel better that way." Yu saw the dangerous look in his eyes and felt even more embarrassed. She instinctively drew her legs back and raised her hand to snatch it back, but he held her wrist in his grip. With a gentle tug, she fell into his arms. Li Jinan had a pair of beautiful eyes. They were long and narrow. His dark and deep eyes stared straight at her. When he lowered his head, she could smell that he had just showered. It was clean and fragrant. The feel of his skin on her skin was very clear. Yu's heart raced. Li Jinan put the phone aside. He lifted her chin with one hand and pressed his lips against hers. His soft lips parted gently. Li Jinan pried them open and pulled her into his arms. He took the opportunity to pin her under his body. Yu's heart raced. She blinked a few times, and her breathing quickened. Li Jinan closed his eyes and tasted her lips delicately. He caressed her waist and slid his hand up to gently lift her spaghetti strap, revealing the straps of her bra. Yu's breathing grew heavy. She reached out and smacked his hand away. Turning her head away, she said, "No." Li Jinan opened his eyes and stared at her. Yu twisted her legs and whispered, "It's not good to stay at an elder's place. Tomorrow, we'll go back to Kingstown." "Do it again?" Li Jinan raised his eyebrows and smiled. His straightforward words caused Yu to turn her head away. She blushed and responded with a grunt. Li Jinan released her and lay down beside her. He asked, "I heard that women don't like to wear this when they sleep. Do you wear it even when you sleep?" Yu was stunned. It was only then that she realized he was referring to her bra. "Aren't you here? If you're not here, I won't wear it." "What's there to be afraid of? It's not like I haven't seen it before. I'm afraid that you're plotting something against me." Chapter 1493. Yi Yu was at a loss for words. She pushed him away and said, "Go away." He flipped over and hugged her. "Why should I go away? You're up to no good. You're only finding out now." Li Jinan spread his legs and pinned her between them. "It's too late." Yi Yu pushed his legs away in annoyance and asked, "Am I inviting a wolf into my house?" "No." Li Jinan narrowed his eyes as he hugged her. "If I were a wolf, you would have been eaten by now." Yi Yu snorted. "I would have eaten a long time ago." "Oh, yes, I did." Li Jinan's lips curled up in a smile as he hugged her. "So, you have to be careful. The wolf won't leave until it's full." Yi Yu blushed. She elbowed him and said, "Get lost." Li Jinan chuckled, but didn't move an inch. They hadn't had a good rest for a few days. Li Jinan soon fell into a deep sleep with her in his arms. Yi Yu's chest was filled with anxiety. When she heard the even breathing coming from beside her, her cheeks began to burn. This feeling, why do we feel like we're husband and wife? Is this how it feels to be a married couple? Living under the same roof, lying on the same bed, leaning against each other, whispering to each other, teasing each other. Yi Yu turned her head and glanced at Li Jinan. Li Jinan's features were very good-looking. With his eyes closed, he looked less sharp than usual. He looked very quiet and gentle. Yi Yu gently lifted his hand and turned around to face him. This is Li Jinan, a man who was completely different from Shen Luoan, a man who gave her the feeling of a married couple and the reality of a married couple. For some reason, Yi Yu was in a good mood. She reached out and pressed the button on the bedside table. The room was dark. Yi Yu closed her eyes. Unbeknownst to her, in the darkness, Li Jinan's lips were silently curled up. Li Jinan slept soundly until early in the morning. When he opened his eyes, Yi Yu was in his arms, breathing evenly as she faced him. The white spaghetti-strap dress didn't obstruct his vision much. With one look, he could see her full, snow-white cleavage. It wasn't big, but for Li Jinan, it was extremely tempting. His body felt hot, and Li Jinan felt his mouth go dry. With a slight movement, Li Jinan retracted his leg and breathed a sigh of relief. Yi Yu's body moved a little, and she opened her eyes. She noticed that his face was abnormally red, but thought that it was because he had just woken up and felt a little warm, so she didn't take it to heart. She stretched out her hands and kicked off with her legs. She yawned and moaned in pleasure. However, she noticed that Li Jinan had turned his head to look at her. His eyes were burning. Li Jinan saw that under her snow-white arms, her delicate skin was slightly flushed. It was a seductive color. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down. It wasn't a hot body, but it made him more and more unbearable. When Yi Yu saw his gaze, she felt a sense of foreboding. She instinctively took a step back. Li Jinan felt his body stiffen. He looked at her and asked in all seriousness, "Why did you seduce me?" "Huh?" Yi Yu was a little confused. She looked at him in bewilderment. "What do you mean?" Chapter 1494. Yi Yu looked at Li Jinan's back from behind. She was a little confused. After thinking about it, she still didn't know what she had done. Ridiculous. Yi Yu stood up and yawned. While Li Jinan was gone, she took out her clothes. She glanced at the bathroom and heard the sound of running water coming from inside. He probably won't be coming out anytime soon, right? As Yi Yu thought about it, she lifted her nightgown and took it off. Just as the nightgown left her head, the door to the bathroom opened. Li Jinan's face was wet. When he saw Yi Yu's exquisite figure, the fire that he had just quelled was ignited again. His throat tightened and his mouth went dry. When Yi Yu heard the door open behind her, her body stiffened. She turned her head and saw Li Jinan walking toward her. Li Jinan raised his long arm and pulled her over. Yi Yu gasped and clutched her chest. She looked at him warily and asked, "What? What are you trying to do?" Li Jinan didn't respond. He pressed his strong and tall body against hers. His breathing was a little rushed as he pushed her against the closet. Yi Yu instinctively held her breath as she looked at him. Her heart was racing. Li Jinan took a deep breath and resisted the urge to pull her along. He asked, "Don't you know that there's a man in the room? Didn't you go to the bathroom?" Who knew that you would suddenly come out? Yu was exasperated. Even if I saw him, so what? It's not like I haven't seen him before. Why are you reacting so strongly? Yu's words were self-righteous. When Li Jinan heard that, he leaned forward and pressed her against him. In a low voice, he said, "Don't you know that it's easy for men to get into trouble in the morning? I didn't do it on purpose." Yu pushed him away and said, "This is my home. Why should I care about you? Ridiculous." Ugh. Before she could finish her sentence, it was stuffed into her mouth. Li Jinan's actions were merciless. He pressed her against the closet roughly and pried open her lips to suck lightly. Yu's eyes widened. The first thing she realized was that she hadn't brushed her teeth. No, she hadn't brushed her teeth. He quickly shrank back, but the space around him was already pathetically small. There was simply no way to dodge. She wanted to push him away, but she couldn't move him at all. Li Jinnan's hands were getting more and more erratic. "Yeah." Yu reached out to push his face away and said, "I said no." Li Jinnan pressed his body even tighter against hers. His hot lips pressed against her abdomen as he asked, "Can I hurry up?" "I can't." Yu's face turned even redder. In a small voice, she said, "I'm not feeling well. Let's wait until we get back to Kingstown." Moreover, was he really that fast? She didn't believe it. Li Jinnan chuckled and planted a big kiss on her lips. "Okay," he replied. Yu's face turned even redder. She quickly picked up the straps and said, "Go away. I need to get dressed." "All right. You splashed water all over my face. I can kiss you clean." "No need." She picked up the clothes that she had hung out to dry the day before and put them on. "Hurry up and get out. Don't let my dad think that we're doing something in here." Li Jinan harumphed lightly. "I'd like to." Yu turned her head and glared at him. She raised her leg and kicked him. "Get out." Chapter 1495. Yu turned around and glared at him. She extended her leg and kicked him. "Get out." Li Jinan was burning with anger. He wanted to see her, but he was afraid that he wouldn't have enough self-control and would be kicked down. He walked out, picked up his shirt, and put on. However, it was not appropriate for him to leave immediately. He stood at the corner of the wall and calmed his emotions before slowly walking out. Outside, Yi Jinhua had already prepared breakfast. When he saw Li Jinan walk out, he smiled and waved at him. "Why are you up so early? Come and have your breakfast. I'll help Grandpa Yu out." "Let me help you." Yi Jinhua was very pleased with Li Jinnan's thoughtfulness. He nodded his head and waved his hand. "It's fine. You go ahead and eat first. You should be out in a while. You want to return to Kingstown today, right?" "When?" "Yes, you'll have to ask Yu about the exact time. I'm fine with anything. There are only 2 buses going to Kingstown. One at 10 in the morning and one at 2 in the afternoon. There won't be any later. You'd better take the afternoon one. There's more time." Li Jinnan's heart warmed slightly as he replied, "Thank you, Dad. I drove my own car here. I can leave at any time. Even tonight is fine. I'll let Yu accompany you for a little longer." Yi Jinhua understood and said, "There's no need. It's dangerous to go back at night. We have to leave before it gets dark." As they spoke, the 2 of them arrived at Yu's grandfather's room. Yu's grandfather had long since woken up. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding a photo frame. His turbid old eyes were filled with warmth as he looked at the photo. Sensing the commotion above him, Yu's grandfather raised his head. When he saw Yi Jinhua, he smiled kindly and beckoned him over. "Come here." Yi Jinhua felt a little helpless. He walked up and said, "Dad, let's eat." Yu's grandfather smiled and said, "Why isn't your mother back yet?" When Li Jinan heard that, he was slightly taken aback. Yu's grandmother wasn't home, and Yi Qianqian had never mentioned her. She had probably left long ago. But the old man was already suffering from Alzheimer's, yet he still remembered his departed wife. Yi Jinhua reached out to help him up and said, "Mom will come back. Recently, there's been a good harvest in the fields, so Mom is quite busy. I'll go help your mom." "Mom, I don't need your help. You just have to wait at home." "Oh." Yu's grandfather was still holding on to the photo frame. He said, "When can she come back?" "I'll be back when I'm done. Leave some food for her." She can eat it when she comes back. Yu Yu's grandfather held the photo frame tightly and looked at his wife in the frame. Don't say that I don't miss her again. It wouldn't be good if she loses her temper and runs away from home. Yi Jinhua nodded in response. He was already used to this. He reached out to take the photo frame in his father's hand and said, "Dad, it's time to eat. Put it down." Oh, the old man was a little reluctant. He looked at the photo frame and was led out by Yi Jinhua. But after 2 steps, he turned back and said, "No, your mother will throw a tantrum later and say that I don't care about her anymore. This woman is very troublesome." As he said that, he hugged the photo frame in his arms and walked out with satisfaction. What's to eat? Li Jinnan's heart, which had not been touched for many years, was unexpectedly touched by this old man. He felt a little bitter. Chapter 1496. He supported Yi Yuyu's grandfather to the dining room. Yi Yuyu was already sitting there. Her clothes were neat and tidy, and she had no makeup on. She looked good. After serving breakfast, she took a bowl and blew on it before walking over to the grandfather. When the grandfather saw Yi Yuyu, a smile broke out on his face. "Yuyu." Yi Yuyu responded with a grin. Her smile deepened. After breakfast, Yi Yuyu took the grandfather for a walk before she was chased away by Yi Jinhua. Li Jinnan's car was parked in a parking lot in Yintown. It was some distance away from Yi Yuyu's house. Yi Yuyu was wearing jeans and a white t-shirt. She had on a pair of casual sneakers. Her skin was much fairer than most people in Yintown, coupled with Li Jinnan's physique and appearance. Many people were looking at them along the way. "Hey, isn't that Qian? No way. Qian isn't that tall, but they really look alike. Who's that man? He's so handsome. That's Yi Qian. I saw her walk out of Uncle Jinhua's house with my own eyes. It can't be wrong." Many people were looking at them and discussing them. Although Li Jinnan and Yi Yuyu knew about it, they didn't care. After getting into the car, the crowd exclaimed when they saw it coming out. "It's a Bentley. F***CK. He's so rich. Yi Qian has hooked up with a rich man." Achoo. Yi Qian was sitting comfortably in her office when she suddenly felt a gust of cold wind. She shivered and said, "It's so cold." Turn down the air conditioner. "Hey sis, it's already 26 degrees. A colleague beside her said, "Did you catch a cold last night?" "Of course not." Yi Qian stood up just as the bell rang. She was relieved. "I'm going to get lost. I'm freezing." Before she could leave, she heard her phone ring. She picked it up. It was a phone call she hadn't received in a long time. When she saw the caller, Yi Qian was a little surprised. She picked it up and said, "Hello. Hello, long time no see. Where are you?" "At the office. I was just about to go eat." Achoo. Yi Qian's nose itched and she sneezed. Shun Jilia whistled and said, "I think you need some medicine. Let's go. Since you caught a cold, you should eat something hot. Shall we go for hot pot?" "I'm not going. Are you crazy to eat hot pot on such a hot day?" "What do you want to eat then?" Shun Jilia drove to the headquarters of Eurasian Comics with ease. "Whatever you say. I want to eat expensive food. Treat me to fried paste noodles." Shun Jilia asked, "Can't you be more ambitious?" "Shredded pork with bean sauce then." "I'm not picky." Shun Jilia was speechless. He turned the car around and saw Yi Qian walking out of the Eurasian Comics. He pressed the horn. Yi Qian looked over and walked toward him. He got into the car and asked, "Where did you get a car? What are you doing in Kingstown?" "Uh-huh. I've been transferred to the hospital in Kingstown." "This is the car assigned by the hospital. You can come and play with me any time in the future." Yi Yu fastened her seatbelt and said, "I'll register with the specialist if I don't go. Don't embarrass yourself." Shun Jilia chuckled. "Fine, I won't hang up. Anyway, with the way you are, it's good enough that you don't cause mental illness in others. I don't expect to earn your money either. What are you going to eat?" "That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.